Chapter 2100. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but be tempted. This madman's strength was obvious to all. It was a great temptation to listen to him in the future. However, he really didn't dare to gamble, because Madman was too confident, and he also knew that Madman's strength was far more than this. Although the temptation was great, the price was also great. If Madman really defeated the Golden Ape, then he would have to give the Black Tortoise world to Madman. This wasn't a good deal. Don't be like a woman. Just say it. Do you dare to gamble? Madman said. Ha! Qin Feiyang laughed dryly. Senior brother, I was just joking. You took it seriously. Joking? If you don't dare, then you don't dare. Why find an excuse? Madman's face was full of disdain. Qin Feiyang smiled and quickly changed the topic. He asked curiously, how long does it take to cultivate from a half-step paragon god to a beginner paragon god? How long? Madman murmured and continued to move forward with Qin Feiyang. After a long time, he shook his head. It depends on one's talent. Those with good talent can take hundreds of thousands of years. Those with average talent can take millions or even tens of millions of years. Those with good talent need hundreds of thousands of years? Qin Feiyang was dumbstruck. He asked, then what if we have enough soul stones? That's a different story. If there's a time array, then it's even better. In short, once you break through to the war god realm, you will be in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. When you break through to the monarch god realm and paragon god realm, you will be in seclusion for even longer. Tens of thousands of years is common. Just like the 9 elders of our Empyrean Palace. From the time I entered Empyrean Palace until now, I have only seen them a few times. Madman sighed. Tens of thousands of years. Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Because of the ancient castle, let alone thousands or tens of thousands of years, he hadn't even tried to cultivate for decades. In his opinion, it was too long. It was too boring. Cultivating in seclusion all day. What fun was there in life? The path of cultivation is like this. The higher the realm, the more boring it gets. Great Elder kept urging me to go into seclusion, but I just wasn't willing. Madman pursed his lips. Qin Feiyang asked curiously, how long has it been since you became a half-step paragon god? How long? Madman pondered for a moment and said, probably 7,000 to 8,000 years. 7,000 or 8,000 years. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. When Madman broke through to the half-step supreme god realm and dominated the 9-heaven palace, he wasn't even born yet. In that case, this fellow was also an antique. Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang frowned. Madman had broken through to half-step paramount god 7 or 8,000 years ago. At that time, it seemed to be the time when the ancestor's reputation was rising. And it was at that time that the ancestor went missing. In other words, when the ancestor entered 9-heaven palace, he met Madman. When Qin Feiyang thought of this, he was immediately bewildered. He had always thought that Madman was a junior in front of the ancestor. He had never seen the ancestor in person, only heard rumors. However, he never expected that Madman and the ancestor were from the same time period. The meaning was completely different. Because if Madman was only a junior, then he definitely didn't know much about the ancestor's deeds. After all, the rumors were more or less untrue. But as people from the same time period, he definitely knew the ancestor's background. In other words, this Madman knew everything about the ancestor. Qin Feiyang looked at Madman and asked with a pleading tone, Senior brother, can you tell me why my ancestor disappeared? Madman glanced at him, shook his head and sighed. After thousands of years, if I had cultivated seriously, I would have broken through to the half-step supreme god realm by now. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but be angry. I'm asking you a question. You ask me, and I have to answer you? How much face do you have? Madman's face was full of disdain. Qin Feiyang was infuriated, but a sense of powerlessness soon followed. If it were anyone else, he could think of a way to force the other party to say it. But this madman, although he looked unrestrained and frivolous, was actually a scheming old fox. Coupled with his terrifying strength, he really couldn't do anything. Roar! The following journey was not as smooth as the beginning. From time to time, a ferocious beast would run out, and their strength was extremely terrifying. The weakest was Half-Step Supreme God. Half-Step Supreme God ferocious beasts were also common. This extreme West has really exceeded my expectations. The degree of danger should be comparable to the depths of the heavenly dragon sea. Madman had long stopped underestimating the place. His mind was highly focused, and he would immediately flee if there was any movement. Just as he said, it wasn't that he couldn't win, but that he was afraid of trouble. After all, once he fought with a ferocious beast, it would attract other nearby ferocious beasts. Time flew by. The sky gradually darkened. The night in the far west was covered by dark clouds, and the moon couldn't be seen. Everywhere was pitch black. Qin Feiyang and Madman became more and more careful. Roar! Beast roars sounded in the night sky from time to time. At first, it was nothing, but late at night, the two of them sensed a ferocious beast even more terrifying than the golden ape in the glacier ahead. This won't do. We have to go around, Qin Feiyang said solemnly. Its aura was even more terrifying than the golden ape's. Without a doubt, the ferocious beast hiding under the glacier was definitely a half-step supreme god. Madman didn't dare to be careless and immediately led Qin Feiyang around the glacier ahead. But soon, the two of them stopped again. Madman's brows were tightly furrowed. Qin Feiyang had a look of fear, because no matter how they went around, they would always encounter ferocious beasts stronger than Half-Step Supreme God. Looks like we have to stop here. Qin Feiyang was silent for a moment, then turned to look at Madman, because it was obvious that they had already entered the depths of the far west. The ferocious beasts they would encounter next would probably be at the Half-Step Supreme God level. Unless they had absolute confidence in their strength, they wouldn't be able to continue. Madman scanned the front, his face full of unwillingness. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he said to Qin Feiyang, "Why don't we use the spatial divine item to travel? You want to go in so badly?" Qin Feiyang frowned angrily. Madman smiled and said, "We've already come this far. Wouldn't it be a pity to give up halfway?" Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly. Madman said, "Don't dilly-dally. Quickly take me to your spatial divine item." "Go to my spatial divine item?" Qin Feiyang was taken aback and frowned. "Why, don't you have it?" "This." Madman's expression stiffened as he smiled embarrassedly. "I really don't." Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. He just sneered at Madman. Did he think he was an idiot? How could a half-step supreme god not have a spatial divine item? "I'm not lying to you. I used to look down on spatial divine items," Madman said. "Look down on?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "That's right. Only a coward who's afraid of death would prepare a spatial divine item and be ready to escape at any time." Madman said, "What kind of logic is that? Who said that a spatial divine item is for escaping? There are other uses for it, okay?" Qin Feiyang was speechless. All right. Hurry up," Madman urged with an awkward expression. "You really don't have a spatial divine item?" Qin Feiyang still didn't believe it. Who didn't know the benefits of a spatial divine item? This guy definitely wanted to enter the Black Tortoise world again and take the opportunity to observe it. "I really don't. If you don't believe me, use your divine sense to search. If you find it, I'll give it to you," Madman said. "Really?" Qin Feiyang asked. Come. Madman opened his hands and didn't have the slightest intention of resisting. "I still don't believe it," Qin Feiyang muttered and released his divine sense, pouncing towards Madman. "You're really searching?" Madman's face darkened. A divine sense appeared and blocked Qin Feiyang's divine sense. Nonsense. You're the one who asked me to search. Why, are you feeling guilty now? Qin Feiyang sneered. Who doesn't have a secret? I really don't have a spatial divine item. Why don't you believe me? Madman said powerlessly. Don't give me that. Qin Feiyang sneered. Now he naturally wouldn't believe it. Madman was instantly annoyed and said angrily, Brat, don't go too far. If you provoke me, I'll really announce your identity. You. Qin Feiyang was furious in his heart. Other than threatening him, what else could he do? As a 7-foot man, isn't he ashamed? Hurry up. Madman shouted impatiently. I really owe you in my previous life. Qin Feiyang glared fiercely at Madman and then helplessly brought him to the black tortoise world. That's more like it. Perform well like this. Maybe if I'm happy, I'll tell you everything about Qin Batian and Lu Zhenyang. Madman stood in the sky and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smug face and smiled. Who are you trying to fool? Qin Feiyang sneered and controlled the black tortoise world, silently shuttling through the night sky. This spatial divine item. The more I look at it, the stranger it becomes. Madman crossed his arms and looked at the black tortoise world, muttering thoughtfully. Don't let him see anything. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself and was quite worried. In fact, he had thought of bringing Madman to the castle. But the castle couldn't be exposed, because the castle's time laws were easier to distinguish. Once they entered the castle, Madman would definitely be able to sense the abnormality of time, which would be even more troublesome. Moreover, alchemy scripture, 6-word divine art, fire lotus, mermaid princess, and others were all in the castle. He really didn't dare to take this risk. Sure enough, it was as expected. The deeper they went, the stronger the beasts they encountered. As for how strong they were, Qin Feiyang couldn't judge, because he still didn't understand the existence of the Paragon God level. However, just the aura emitted by those beasts made him feel a fatal threat. In this place, if one didn't have enough strength or protection, they would definitely die. Around late at night, Qin Feiyang gradually discovered that the aura of the beast seemed to be getting less and less. What was going on? Wait, he suddenly remembered the information he got from Long Tianyu's memory. Chapter 2101. According to Long Tianyu's memories, after entering the hinterland of the far west, there would be fewer and fewer beasts, because the Grey Castle was in the hinterland. And because of the existence of the Grey Castle, the entire hinterland was filled with a strange power that could steal life and erode the soul. It was because of this power that the beasts of the far west did not dare to enter the hinterland. Even if they entered the hinterland, they did not dare to stay for long. In other words, it was very likely that they had already entered the hinterland. Madman. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at Madman, and the anger in his heart immediately rose. Not long after this guy entered the black tortoise world, he took out an armchair and lay on it, leisurely taking a nap, as if these things had nothing to do with him. Madman slowly opened his eyes, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said, "Don't be so rude. Call me senior brother." "Look at you now. How do you look like a senior brother?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and said, "Stop talking nonsense. Let's go out and take a look." "Go out for what?" Madman was stunned. Qin Feiyang said, "I estimate that we should have already entered the hinterland of the far west. I want to go out and confirm it." "For such a small matter, can't you go out by yourself? Why did you call me?" Madman glared at Qin Feiyang and closed his eyes again. "Who is coming to the far west?" Qin Feiyang was furious. He stepped forward and grabbed Madman, and appeared above the glacier outside. "You!" Madman could not help but be angry. But before he could get angry, a trace of surprise crawled on his face as he scanned the surroundings. In this world, he really did sense an invisible force. This power had an extremely strong penetrating power. It could actually ignore his physical defense, enter his body, steal his life, and erode his soul. As expected, we have reached the hinterland of the far west. Madman muttered. Why was it so quiet? Why didn't Qin Feiyang say anything? When he looked at Qin Feiyang, his expression changed drastically. He saw that Qin Feiyang had already turned into an ice sculpture. The madman hurriedly waved his hand, and a barrier appeared. However, although there was a barrier separating the cold current, the ice on Qin Feiyang's body did not show any signs of melting. Don't tell me he's already dead. The madman's eyelids twitched as he realized he had been careless. This was the hinterland of the far west, and the cold current was countless times more terrifying than outside. Let alone Qin Feiyang, who was a perfect war god. Even a half-step divine monarch like him felt his body stiffen. Boom! He hurriedly circulated his divine power to melt the ice on Qin Feiyang's body. Several breaths later, the ice finally melted. Qin Feiyang shivered and curled up. He looked up at Madman and said angrily, Do you know that I almost died? Are you blaming me? Madman pursed his lips. Who should I blame if not you? Qin Feiyang's eyes were red. The moment he came out, his consciousness was swallowed by the cold current, and his entire body fell into darkness. He didn't even have time to enter the black tortoise world again. In those few short breaths, he had truly felt the aura of death. Isn't it fine now? Don't be like a sissy and make a fuss. Madman glanced at Qin Feiyang with disdain, and then scanned the void again. His brows gradually furrowed. I'm a sissy? Qin Feiyang was so angry that he went crazy. What kind of person was this? He was almost frozen to death, and he was still mocking him like this? I'll endure it. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and suppressed the grievance in his heart as he scanned the surroundings. Immediately, his eyes were also filled with bewilderment. The barrier formed by Madman blocked the fatal cold current, but it couldn't block that invisible force. It was a bit exaggerated. It could even penetrate a barrier made of divine power? Madman frowned and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. We seem to be sure that we shouldn't have come to this place. You only know now. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Why don't we go back now? Madman said. You must be joking. We've already come this far and we're still going back. Qin Feiyang said. Now his interest was piqued. Madman chuckled and said, If that's the case, then let's go. Qin Feiyang was about to bring Madman into the black tortoise world. But at this moment, the little boy's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind again. Qin Feiyang, you can't come to the black tortoise world again. There was a tone that didn't allow for discussion. Why? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked in surprise. The penetrative power of this force is beyond imagination. If you don't use your origin power, even the black tortoise world won't be able to block it. The little boy said. So terrifying? Qin Feiyang was shocked. The little boy said, You can try going to the castle. The castle is a heaven-defying divine artifact with the power of law. It might be able to block it. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated. Let's go. What are you still standing there for? Seeing Qin Feiyang standing there motionless, Madman couldn't help but urge him. I can't go. My spatial divine artifact can block the corrosion of this force. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Madman was stunned and frowned. Then what should we do? How would I know? Qin Feiyang said angrily. He wasn't omnipotent, so why ask him everything? Then let's try walking for a while. Let's see how strong this force is. Madman frowned and suggested. That's the only way. Qin Feiyang nodded. In short, he would never bring Madman to the castle, although Madman had been helping him during this period of time. Who knew Madman's true purpose? It was better to be on guard. The two converged their auras and flew deeper into the castle at their fastest speed. As they went deeper and deeper, they could no longer sense the aura of the beasts. But the invisible force was becoming more and more terrifying. At first, the feeling of seizing life force, and eroding the soul wasn't too obvious. But gradually, Qin Feiyang and Madman could clearly sense it. After about 1,000,000 miles, Qin Feiyang's face suddenly lit up. He pointed to the glacier in front and shouted, "Look, the gray castle is in front." Madman looked up and was slightly stunned. Other than the endless glacier, there was nothing else in front of them. "Where is the castle? Are you seeing things?" Madman looked at Qin Feiyang and frowned. "No way." Qin Feiyang rubbed his eyes and looked again. There was indeed no castle. What was going on? Madman looked at Qin Feiyang, and his face suddenly changed. "Not good. It should be that force that has already eroded your consciousness, causing you to hallucinate just now." Hallucination? Qin Feiyang was shocked. It seemed that his consciousness was indeed in a trance. "You can't go any further." Madman stopped and said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang was a little unwilling. "Then should I just give up like this?" Madman pondered for a moment and said, "Your space divine item should be able to hold on for a while. Go in and hide first. I will go take a look alone." "Is this okay?" Qin Feiyang was a little worried. "It's okay. With my cultivation, I can still hold on for a while." After Madman finished speaking, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared from Qin Feiyang's sight without looking back. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed, and he also entered the castle. Everyone was cultivating in seclusion. Qin Feiyang didn't disturb everyone and silently sensed the castle. In the end, he found that the castle could really block the erosion of that force. He finally let out a sigh of relief. After pondering for a moment, he drove the castle and chased after Madman. He definitely couldn't catch up. After all, Madman's speed had far surpassed his. However, he was more and more curious about the mysterious gray castle. Qin. Suddenly, Fire Lotus opened her eyes and walked to Qin Feiyang's side. During this period of seclusion, Fire Lotus had also broken through to perfect war god level. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang turned to look at Fire Lotus and asked with a smile. Fire Lotus looked at the glacier outside through the image in the void. She shook her head and said worriedly, "You shouldn't have followed Madman here." Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and asked, "You know this place?" "I heard people in Ninth Heaven Palace say that the danger level of the far west is comparable to the depths of the Sky Dragon Sea. Even if an absolute god came in, they might not be able to leave alive." Fire Lotus said, "I see. With the castle and Black Tortoise World, it should be fine." Qin Feiyang smiled comfortingly. "You're too optimistic." Fire Lotus shook her head and looked at the glacier outside. She let out a low sigh in her heart. At the same time, Madman sped along. His face was no longer as frivolous as before. It was incomparably serious. That was because that strange power was far more terrifying than he had expected. The vitality in his body was quickly draining. His soul was also being eroded. Suddenly, he looked at an ice mountain in front of him. That ice mountain was more than 1,000 feet high. At the peak of the mountain stood a black-haired old man. Grand Elder. Madman was taken aback and hurriedly flew towards the ice mountain. He shouted from afar, "Old man, why are you here?" However, the Grand Elder did not answer. He just smiled at him and waved at him, as if calling him over. A trace of suspicion crept up Madman's brows, but suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. He slammed on the brakes and stopped in the void. He rubbed his eyes and looked up again. The Grand Elder and the ice mountain had both disappeared. It really was an illusion. Madman's heart trembled. It seemed that even his consciousness was beginning to be eroded. But there was not even a shadow of the gray castle. "Do I really have to give up?" Madman muttered to himself. Suddenly, he turned around and looked at the void behind him. His eyes flashed, and in the next moment, he disappeared without a trace. Space Divine item. If Qin Feiyong was here, he would definitely run out and find Madman to settle the score. He clearly had a Space Divine item, but he was still hiding it? Unfortunately, Qin Feiyong was still far behind and did not have the chance to see it. At the same time, in the central area of the hinterland, a huge gray castle stood on top of a glacier. It was surrounded by white snow. However, there was no snow on top of the gray castle. There was not even a piece of frost to be found. At this moment, a gray figure was standing on top of the castle, looking ahead. He was looking in the direction of Qin Feiyong and Madman. I didn't expect someone to break in. It seems that the existence of this sovereign has already been known. The gray figure muttered and disappeared again. Not even a trace was left, as if he had never appeared. Chapter 2102. The night was as dark as ink. The howling snowstorm swept in all directions. In the void, the two spatial divine objects, one in front and one behind, quickly approached the location of the gray castle. About half an hour passed. The madman suddenly stopped in the void, looking at the scene in front of him, his eyes shining. The glacier was endless. A gray castle, like an immemorial giant beast, lay on top of the glacier, emitting a cold and mysterious aura. There really is an ancient castle, the madman murmured. After observing for a while and confirming that there was no danger, he rode the spatial divine object and carefully approached the gray castle. Soon, he appeared at the gate of the ancient castle. The stone gate was tightly closed, releasing a strong aura. There were no windows in the entire gray castle, so there was no way to see the situation inside. I was born in the North Domain since I was young, but I didn't know that there was such a castle in the far west. The madman rode the spatial divine object, carefully observing the gray castle, his eyes full of curiosity. Finally, he came to a conclusion. This castle was not simple. According to his judgment, it should be a divine artifact, and its level was not low. Otherwise, it would not be able to remain undamaged in such a harsh environment. But how to get in? After pondering for a while, the madman gritted his teeth, left the spatial divine object, and appeared outside the gate. His entire body was suddenly drowned by that strange power. In an instant, his strong and full body shriveled, and dense wrinkles appeared on his face. His hair also quickly turned white. In an instant, he aged more than half. One must know, he was still a half-step supreme god. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the strange energy that permeated this place was. The madman was also shocked, and didn't dare to stay for a moment, immediately entering the spatial divine object. He was still scared. Not only was more than half of his life force stolen, even his soul was wrapped by that strange power. A heart-wrenching pain came from his soul. It took him a lot of effort to refine that strange power. What should I do? While recovering his life force, he racked his brains to think of a way. Let's try again. A moment passed. He suddenly gritted his teeth, left the spatial divine object again, and appeared in front of the stone gate. The same situation as before happened again. His life force and soul were being plundered and eroded by that strange power. However, he didn't care at all. Blood-colored divine power surged out. "Open for me!" With a roar, he punched the stone door. Rumble! A loud explosion rang out, shaking the heavens and the earth. However, the stone door did not budge at all. The gray castle didn't even tremble in the slightest. So sturdy. Madman was dumbfounded. After he came back to his senses, he didn't dare stay any longer. He quickly hid in a spatial divine object and immediately sat cross-legged on the ground to refine the strange energy that was corroding his soul. This time, he stayed longer than before. The life force that was robbed was naturally more than the last time. His hair was white and mottled, and he was emaciated. His body was also extremely stooped, and he looked like an old man on the verge of death. After a while, only then did the madman refine the strange power in his sea of consciousness. Immediately after, he stood up and looked at the gray castle's stone door with fear in his eyes. "I can't go out again, or I'll definitely lose my life." Even his voice had become extremely hoarse. Although the strange power could be refined, the life force that was robbed was not so easy to recover. Now, there wasn't much life force left in his body. If he went out again, he would definitely die on the spot. But the gray castle was right in front of him. He was unwilling to give up just like that. I can't rush. Let's recover the life force I lost first," Madman whispered, trying to calm himself down. Then he took out a pill. This pill was emerald green and had a total of 8 patterns. It emitted an extremely majestic life force. This was the Divine Life Pill. The Divine Life Pill not only had the effects of healing pills, bone replenishing pills, regeneration pills, and other pills, but it also had the ability to recover life force. Madman took the Divine Life Pill and closed his eyes to cultivate. The effect of the Divine Life Pill was immediate. After the madman took it, his old face and snow-white hair began to slowly recover. Time passed bit by bit. For hours later, Madman finally recovered his original appearance. He was full of energy. He opened his eyes and looked at the stone door again. Damn it! But suddenly, his body trembled. He seemed to have forgotten about Qin Feiyang. After so long, would he have become a dry corpse? It's over. When Qin Batian and Lu Jingyan know that I killed their descendant, they will definitely come to settle the score with me. No, I have to go back and take a look. If I can find his body, I can answer to Qin Batian and the others. Madman patted his head and immediately drove the spatial divine item back the way he came. However, after turning around, it hadn't even flown half a mile when the spatial divine object suddenly seemed to have collided with something and was actually bounced back. Madman was startled. He looked up and saw a gray light screen appear in the void outside. This light screen flickered with a dim light and blocked the way in front. What's going on? Madman was surprised. He waved his hand and the screen quickly turned to look in several other directions. Finally, he was shocked to find that it was not a simple light screen, but a gray barrier. The barrier, with the gray castle as the center, covered an area of 1 mile around. In other words, now he was trapped inside the barrier. When did this barrier appear? Why can't I feel anything? Madman glanced at the barrier with a dumbfounded expression. At the same time, outside the barrier in the void, why is there a barrier? Qin Feiyang stood in the castle and looked at the great barrier in astonishment. Although his speed was much slower than Madman's, it had still been more than 4 hours. So just now he finally came here, and he just happened to see the gray barrier appear. Originally, he also wanted to get close to the gray castle, but the appearance of the barrier made him stop decisively. In other words, Madman actually helped him out and saved him from being trapped. This kind of barrier won't appear for no reason. Something must have hit it to trigger the barrier and make it appear. Fire Lotus glanced at the barrier and said, "That's true." Qin Feiyang nodded. What could it be? Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang turned to look at Fire Lotus and asked, "We don't seem to have seen Madman along the way, right?" No. Fire Lotus shook her head. Could it be? Qin Feiyang looked at the barrier again and said in surprise, "It can't be him, right?" Because they were both in the space divine object and couldn't see each other, neither Qin Feiyang nor Madman knew that the other was here. Compared to the relatively calm Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus, Madman was panicking at this moment. He lowered his head and muttered to himself, "If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have left that kid behind. What should we do now? Qin Batian and Lu Zhengyang are both ruthless people. When they hear the news of Qin Feiyang's death, they will definitely come to settle the score with me." He already thought that Qin Feiyang had died. Of course, He couldn't be blamed for thinking so. After all, this was the Far West, and it was the hinterland that was shrouded in that strange force. And even Qin Feiyang himself said that the space divine object couldn't stop the invasion of the strange force. So in Madman's view, Qin Feiyang definitely wouldn't survive. What a headache! If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have brought him here. In the future, how am I going to explain to Qin Batian and the others? Madman rubbed his forehead and looked at the gray castle, suddenly burning with anger. It's all because of this thing. Today, if I don't break this damn thing and see what's inside, I won't give up. Without a doubt, the gray castle became his target to vent his anger. Shua! The next moment, he appeared outside the stone door, his eyes emitting a sharp light. Shatter for me! With his roar, a golden light emerged, carrying a destructive aura, and blasted towards the stone door. Clang! Boom! The stone door trembled. It works? Madman's eyes suddenly flashed. However, before he had time to be happy, his body stiffened and he immediately cursed, because the stone door only trembled a little before returning to normal. Looking at the place where the golden light bombarded, there was only a white scratch. Damn you! Madman could only hide in the space divine object again. It's really him. Outside the barrier, looking at Madman who appeared and disappeared out of thin air. Qin Feiyang's face suddenly had a trace of anger. He knew that this bastard was ignoring him. Fire Lotus glanced at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "The level of his space divine object is not low." Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. When Madman appeared just now, he also noticed that more than half of Madman's life force was taken away. From this, it could be seen that the strange force inside the barrier was far stronger than outside, and Madman's space divine object could block the strange force inside the barrier, so it was definitely not an ordinary space divine object. Madman is imprisoned, and from the looks of it, he has wanted to break the stone door more than once. But until now, the stone door has not been opened. I'm afraid that even with us, we won't be able to open it. Why don't we go back first? Fire Lotus suggested. Then what about Madman? Qin Feiyang asked. He asked for it, so why should we care? Besides, Madman's life is not in danger if he hides in the space divine object. When we go back, we will report to First Elder and Shangguan Fenglan. They will naturally think of a way to save Madman. Fire Lotus said. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated. Since they were already here, he really didn't want to leave like this. The most important thing was, if there was any treasure hidden in this gray castle, then when First Elder and Shangguan Fenglan came and got the treasure, he would definitely not have a share. If only Chang Shui was here. With Chang Shui's ability, he will definitely be able to break this stone door. Qin Feiyang sighed. Chapter 2103. The key point is that Chang Shui is not in your hands. Let's go. There may not be any treasures in this castle. Maybe there is a Grim Reaper sitting there. Fire Lotus said. Grim Reaper? Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at Fire Lotus, his eyes full of surprise. Look at the strange power emitted by this gray castle. Even the madman can't withstand it. It can be seen that this castle is definitely not an ordinary thing. Then what is the gray figure hiding in the castle if not the Grim Reaper? Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and nodded. It makes sense. Our lives are more important. Let's retreat. After saying that, he turned the castle around and flew away. Boom! However, the castle seemed to be hitting something. Immediately after, a gray light curtain appeared out of thin air and bounced the castle back. Qin Feiyang's eyes widened. Why is there another light curtain? He quickly changed the image and was shocked to find that another enchantment had appeared at this moment. This enchantment was even bigger than the one that trapped the madman. Not only did it imprison Qin Feiyang, but even the madman and the enchantment that trapped him were also enveloped. In other words, now it was equivalent to two enchantments. The first enchantment trapped the madman. The second enchantment trapped Qin Feiyang. Oh no, the people in the gray castle must have noticed that we have entered the far west and set up a trap here in advance. Fire Lotus said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang's heart also sank. If it was really as Fire Lotus said, then they were already trapped here. At the same time, the madman also heard the movement outside and quickly changed the image, locking onto the direction of the castle. What's the situation? Another enchantment actually appeared. His face was also full of surprise. Could it be there was someone else? If there was someone else, who could it be? Wait, it couldn't be Qin Feiyang, right? Welcome to this sovereign's domain of death. Suddenly, a hoarse laugh sounded in the barrier and entered the ears of Qin Feiyang and the madman. The two of them shifted their vision at the same time and locked onto the gray castle. However, they saw nothing outside the gray castle. That hoarse laughter seemed to come out of nowhere. Now I'll give you a chance to live. The hoarse voice sounded again. Just as he finished speaking, the barrier that trapped the madman suddenly dissipated. However, the enchantment that trapped Qin Feiyang showed no signs of dissipating. In other words, at this moment, there was only one barrier here. Qin Feiyang and the madman were trapped in the same barrier. This domain of death is my strongest technique. With your strength, you will never be able to break it. So, I'll kindly advise you not to do useless work. The mysterious man's voice echoed in the bounded domain again. Death domain? Qin Feiyang and madman frowned. Now, please come out first. I don't like to speak while looking at the air. The mysterious man said, looking at the air. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows, listening to what he said. This mysterious man was looking at them now, but there wasn't even a shadow inside the barrier. Could it be? Qin Feiyang suddenly looked at the gray castle, his eyes flashing. Was it the gray figure that gave Long Tianyu the potential pill? Come out. I've already dispersed the power of death. I won't rob your vitality and erode your divine soul. The mysterious man said again. It's already dispersed? Qin Feiyang glanced at the void outside in surprise. He really didn't dare to go out and take the risk. One had to know. The strange power here. Even the madman, a half-step divine lord, couldn't last for a few breaths, let alone him. If the mysterious man was lying to him, wouldn't going out be the same as courting death? The madman was also hesitating. But in the end, he finally gritted his teeth and left the space divine item, appearing inside the barrier. Inside the barrier, the strange power had really disappeared. Seeing that the madman was safe and sound, Qin Feiyang was completely relieved. However, just as Qin Feiyang was about to leave the castle, Fire Lotus said, Qin Dage, take me with you. Take you with me? Qin Feiyang frowned. Maybe I can help. Fire Lotus said. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated. Even if I can't help, you can send me to the castle as soon as possible. There won't be any danger. Fire Lotus said with a smile. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, but you have to promise me that you will always stay by my side and not act on your own. Okay. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, rolled up Fire Lotus, and appeared not far away from the madman. It's really you. Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, the madman was overjoyed and hurriedly ran in front of the two, saying, You really scared me to death. I thought you were already dead. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Wait, that's not right. Didn't you say that your space divine item can't block this strange power? Why is nothing happening now? The madman frowned. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, Didn't you also say that you don't have a space divine item? The madman was stunned, shook his head and smiled bitterly, saying, Okay, pretend I didn't ask. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at the madman, looked at the gray castle and said coldly, We have all come out, but what about you? Are you going to hide in there forever? If you want to see this sovereign's true face, let's see if you have the qualifications. As the mysterious man's voice fell, clouds of gray fog suddenly appeared in the barrier, floating in the void, emitting a gloomy and evil aura. Immediately after, rumble. In the clouds of gray fog, there was a deafening sound. It was not the sound of aura erupting, nor was it the sound of battle, but the sound of footsteps. And there was more than one deafening. Moreover, there was also a terrifying evil aura, as if countless devils were tearing the barrier between heaven and earth, climbing up from hell. What is that? Qin Feiyang and the other two stood together, staring at the gray fog with vigilance. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and more deafening. Qin Feiyang and the other two's heartbeats were beating at the same frequency as the footsteps. Even the qi and blood in their body were surging uncontrollably. Be careful, the madman secretly warned. Qin Feiyang nodded. There was no need to think to know that something bad was going to happen. About a few breaths later, boom! Suddenly, a huge beast shadow walked out from one of the clouds of gray fog. The pupils of the three shrank. It turned out to be a frost ape. It was exactly the same as the 16 frost apes they encountered at the beginning. It had 9 heads, like a small mountain, standing in the void opposite them, exuding a terrifying aura. Be careful, it also has a half-step paragon god cultivation base. The madman whispered. Half-step paragon god. Qin Feiyang's body stiffened. How strong was this mysterious man to be able to summon a half-step paragon god beast? However, an even more shocking scene was yet to come. In the other gray fog, beasts also walked out one after another, and there was more than one kind. There was a snow leopard that was more than 10 meters in size. There was an ice python that was as huge as a mountain ridge. There was also a lion eagle that Qin Feiyang was more familiar with. Each of the lion-headed eagles was dozens of feet tall, comparable to a mountain. Wait, and there was no exception. These beasts were all half-step paragon god existences. The ferocious aura surged, pressing Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus until they were almost out of breath. So many. Even the madman was shocked, because there were a total of 35 beasts that appeared in front of them in the end. Let's begin. The mysterious man's voice sounded. Boom! As the voice fell, the 35 beasts stepped on the void and charged toward Qin Feiyang and the other two. All of you back off. The madman shouted. 35 half-step paragon god beasts. With Qin Feiyang's current cultivation base, there was no room for him to fight back. Even just the fluctuations of the battle were enough to take his life. Hearing the madman's words, Qin Feiyang didn't dare to hesitate and immediately pulled Fire Lotus and retreated. When the two retreated to the edge of the realm of death, the madman waved his hand and a wave of divine power emerged, forming a divine power barrier that enveloped Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. This was naturally to protect Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. After all, the realm of death was only so big, and the battle of half-step paragon god was enough to spread millions of miles away. Therefore, no matter where they retreated, they couldn't escape the fate of being affected by the fluctuations of the battle. Therefore, they had to be prepared in advance. And Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus's lives weren't in danger, so the madman could fight without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, the 35 beasts had already charged in front of the madman, each exuding an aura that could destroy the world. This is interesting. The madman chuckled. Boom! Blood-colored divine power surged out like a tide. In an instant, the madman's aura changed greatly, as if he had become a different person. His eyes flashed red as if he was possessed by a demon god. His fiendish aura was even more terrifying than the 35 beasts. As he waved his hand, the blood-colored divine power gathered together. Clang! In the next instant, A palm-sized blood-colored square seal appeared. Blood demon seal. Fire Lotus might be unfamiliar with the blood demon seal, but Qin Feiyong was very familiar with it, because the madman had used this divine art on Turtle King Island, and it was a peak divine art. I am invincible. Kill. The madman raised his head and laughed wildly. The blood devil seal rushed into the sky and expanded in the wind. In an instant, it turned into a giant seal that was several hundred feet long. Demonic aura spread in all directions. As he waved his hand, the blood demon seal descended with an aura that could destroy heaven and earth. Roar! The two frost apes roared and raised their thick and solid arms to meet the attack. Boom! Inside the enchantment, there was a loud explosion that shook the heavens and earth. The arms of the two frost apes were crushed by the blood devil seal on the spot. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. However, as if they didn't feel pain, they raised their other arm and threw it at the blood demon seal. Although the physical body and power of beasts were naturally stronger than humans, it was still a peak divine art. How could the body of flesh block it? The other arm also shattered with a crack. Blood splattered and dyed the ground red. But then, a scene that shocked the madman and Qin Feiyong even more appeared. The two frost apes' arms were shattered, but they still didn't have any intention of dodging. They didn't even scream. It was as if they really didn't know what pain was. What was even crazier was that after their arms shattered, not only did they not retreat, they used their bodies to charge at the blood demon seal. Chapter 2104. What's going on? Aren't they afraid of death? Qin Feiyong was puzzled. No. Fire Lotus shook her head and glanced at the two frost apes. Suddenly, she found that their eyes seemed to be empty. Could it be? Her gaze trembled as she quickly looked at the other 33 beasts. Their eyes were also empty. I see. She immediately understood and hurriedly shouted, "Madman, be careful! They are puppets!" Puppets? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Madman was also stunned. The two carefully sized up the beasts. After Fire Lotus's reminder, they quickly noticed the clues. The 35 beasts not only had empty eyes but also no heartbeat. They were equivalent to corpses. No wonder they were so crazy. Corpses had no consciousness and were completely controlled by someone. In other words, at this moment, these beasts were secretly controlled by the mysterious person hiding in the gray castle. In the blink of an eye, the two frost apes had already collided with the blood devil seal. With a loud bang, the two frost apes' huge bodies exploded in the void. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The blood devil seal was not damaged at all. It carried a monstrous aura and continued to kill the other puppets. Boom! The remaining 32 beasts were also killed one after another. I was looking forward to it, but I didn't expect it to be a group of puppets. Madman waved his hand, and the blood devil seal turned into a bloody light that floated above his head. The bloody light illuminated half the sky. Looking down on puppets, the mysterious person's voice sounded. Puppets can't activate their battle soul and can't use God techniques. With my means, killing them is like killing dogs. Madman sneered. Hee hee, ha ha. The mysterious person couldn't help but laugh and said, "Don't worry, this is just an appetizer. The real show has yet to begin." Appetizer? Qin Feiyong's heart trembled as he swept his gaze towards the balls of gray mist floating in the air. Could it be that there were stronger puppets in the gray fog? "Come out," the mysterious person shouted. Deafening footsteps could be heard coming from within the gray fog. Boom! In the next moment, more and more ferocious beasts appeared. Just like the 35 ferocious beasts from before, its eyes were empty and there was no heartbeat. However, the auras they emitted were as different as heaven and earth. An initial paragon god. Madman's pupils constricted as he looked at them one by one. In the end, he discovered that there were as many as 50 fierce beasts. Can Madman withstand it? Qin Feiyong was quite worried. 50 beasts that had just become paragon gods. Even if it was a puppet, it was not something that ordinary people could deal with. If they were all alive, Madman would definitely have a hard time. After all, there are too many of them. But puppets! With Madman's methods, it shouldn't be a problem. Fire Lotus whispered. She then looked at the gray castle, a cold light flashing in the depths of her eyes. Go, the mysterious man said. The 50 ferocious beasts instantly turned into a torrent and crazily pounced at Madman. No matter how many come, I'll kill them all. The Madman laughed arrogantly. Without any fear, he charged over. He wasn't afraid of a mere puppet. Qin Feiyong watched nervously. In the meantime, he was even more afraid of the mysterious man in the gray castle. One must know, whether it was a half-step paragon god or an initial paragon god, they were all extremely terrifying existences. And this person actually controlled so many puppets of this level. Just how strong was he? It was hard to imagine. As Fire Lotus said, this person was indeed a terrifying devil comparable to the Grim Reaper. Don't mind it. Suddenly, the mysterious man's voice sounded again. Immediately after, an invisible force crashed down, and the barrier that the madman had set up earlier instantly collapsed. Qin Feiyong's expression suddenly changed, because as soon as the barrier was broken, the fluctuations of the battle between Madman and those puppets were overwhelming. Qin Feiyong immediately felt the threat of death. Quickly go to the castle, Fire Lotus shouted. But before Fire Lotus's voice faded, another invisible force descended and shrouded the two. Then, the two felt their bodies become light. The next moment, they both appeared outside the barrier. The two were stunned. What was this situation? Fire Lotus came back to her senses and said, Qin Dage, take this opportunity to leave. Qin Feiyong nodded. However, before they could enter the castle, another gray barrier appeared out of thin air and trapped them again. Damn it! Fire Lotus glanced at the barrier, her face gloomy. Don't worry, there will be a way. Qin Feiyong secretly comforted her and turned to look at the gray castle, saying, Show me what you have. You have guts, but I don't know how strong you are. The mysterious man smiled sinisterly. Inside the barrier, where Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus were, clouds of black fog immediately appeared. Boom! A series of loud and clear footsteps resounded. Immediately after, from the black fog, beasts walked out one after another. Their strength was not strong, and they were all perfect war gods. Compared to the puppets that Madman was facing at the moment, it could be said that the difference was like heaven and earth. But their numbers were several times more than the puppets that Madman was facing at the moment. Qin Feiyong glanced at them and estimated that there were at least 200 beasts. Fire Lotus glanced at the beasts and said in a low voice, Qin Dage, let me do it, so that I don't get injured and expose my identity. No, although these beasts are all puppets, their cultivation is higher than yours. You are not their opponent. Don't worry about me. A group of perfect war god puppets can't injure me. After Qin Feiyong finished speaking, he decisively sent Fire Lotus to the castle. Only in the castle could he guarantee her safety. You're quite affectionate. Not bad, not bad. This sovereign appreciates you. The mysterious man laughed hoarsely. Qin Feiyong turned a deaf ear and glanced at the beasts. His aura erupted like a volcano as he took the initiative to attack. Kill! The mysterious man's roar also sounded. More than 200 ferocious beasts suddenly turned into a torrent and rushed toward Qin Feiyong from all directions. Humph! Qin Feiyong snorted from his nose and had no intention to defend at all. Divine power gushed out and attacked the beasts. He didn't show any mercy. Every time he attacked, he could kill a puppet. For a moment, broken corpses and limbs flew all over the sky. Blood dyed the sky red. Boom! Suddenly, Just as he smashed a puppet with his palm, two ferocious apes pounced at him fiercely, and their millstone-sized fists fiercely hit his back. But Qin Feiyang's face only turned slightly pale, and he didn't suffer any actual damage. After being tempered by two heavenly tribulations, not only did his strength exceed ordinary people, the willfulness and strength of his body were also comparable to a high-grade divine artifact. So, the attacks of the two ferocious apes didn't have any lethality in front of him. From the beginning to the end, he didn't get angry. He turned around and directly killed the two ferocious apes, because there was no need to get angry with these puppets that had no consciousness and no emotions. Even if you were angry, they wouldn't understand. At this moment, he was like a god of death, his expression extremely cold. It was completely a one-sided massacre. Of course, he didn't use the power of the divine dragon, but the other two types of divine power were enough for him to deal with these puppets. And the battle on the madman's side was more intense than Qin Feiyang's side. Although the madman was very arrogant, he didn't dare to lower his guard in the face of 50 early-stage Supreme God puppets and fought with all his strength. About 100 breaths later, Qin Feiyang stood proudly in the void, his aura like a rainbow. His whole body was covered in blood, as if he was bathed in a rain of blood. The more than 200 ferocious beasts had all been killed. The blood on his body was from those ferocious beasts. Below the glacier, there were mountains of bones piled up, and the pungent smell of blood filled the entire death region. Die for me! It was also at this moment. The madman's violent roar sounded. Qin Feiyang turned his head and saw the head of a ferocious beast being smashed into pieces by the madman's punch. His strength is indeed not simple, Qin Feiyang murmured. With a half-step Supreme God cultivation, killing an early-stage Supreme God ferocious beast, even if it was a puppet, was enough to be praised. It seems that this lord has underestimated you a little. The mysterious man's voice sounded, echoing in the barrier for a long time. I also want to see how strong I am now. Qin Feiyang sneered. When he was still an early-stage war god, he could already kill a half-step Supreme God. What was a mere perfect war god? One must know. He hadn't activated the 6-word divine art yet. The 6-word divine art could ignore the barrier of a large realm. It was estimated that even if it was a perfect war god, he could still fight with the 6-word divine art. Haha, what an arrogant brat! The mysterious man laughed hoarsely and said, This lord will fulfill your wish. As soon as his voice faded, another ferocious beast roared out from the gray fog. Their cultivation had reached the level of a half-step Supreme God. Not enough, not enough. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a wisp of blood-red light streaked across the sky like lightning, entering the head of a ferocious beast. Crack! The ferocious beast's head shattered on the spot. Following closely, that wisp of blood-red light attacked the next ferocious beast. None of the ferocious beasts could withstand the blood-red light's attack and were instantly destroyed. This was the power of the kill formula. Even though it was only formed by a wisp of killing intent, it still had a heaven-defying divine power. And now, he could only activate the kill formula, battle formula, advance formula, and return formula. Although he was only one step away from a half-step Supreme God, a half-step Supreme God had already surpassed the War God level. Therefore, divine arts such as the Divine Dragon formula, the Fire Phoenix formula, and the End of the Void formula were unable to display their original power. In other words, these divine arts could not cause harm to a half-step Supreme God. Of course, if Qin Feiyang really went all out, even if he didn't use the 6-word divine art, he would still be able to fight against a half-step Supreme God. However, this way, he would definitely be injured and bleed. This was not what he wanted to see. Therefore, he was more straightforward and directly revealed the 6-word divine art. Kill one that came out. In the end, it was really like that. Those puppets only revealed half of their bodies in the gray fog before they were mercilessly shattered by the blood-red light. Chapter 2105. Fuck so fierce. Looking at Qin Feiyang killing gods and devils, Madman couldn't help but be dumbfounded. But when he noticed the wisp of blood grace, he smiled in relief. He had personally experienced the might of the blood-colored fleeting grace. He knew the terrifying power of blood grace. This daddy can't lose to him. Trump card, is it? Who doesn't have one? The corners of Madman's mouth curled up, and a wisp of golden light appeared, streaking across the sky like lightning. One of the beasts that had just reached the supreme god realm was instantly killed. Kid, let's compete and see who can kill more. Madman laughed wildly. Qin Feiyang looked at Madman and asked with a smile, "Is there a prize?" "You rascal! You really want to take advantage of me at any time and place." Madman rolled his eyes. "You are an influential figure in our Nine Heavens Palace. Only a fool wouldn't take advantage of you. No prize, I won't do it." Qin Feiyang laughed. Madman snorted coldly. "If you don't want to do it, then don't. This daddy will suffer a loss." "What loss?" Qin Feiyang didn't understand. "Look at your opponent, and then look at this daddy's opponent. They are both supreme god level puppets. In terms of numbers, I definitely can't compare to you. If you want to compete, then let's compete in quality. 1 billion soul stones, do you dare?" Madman's face was full of provocation. Compete in quality? Qin Feiyang's face twitched. If they competed in quality, then he would definitely lose. Because no matter how many he killed, it couldn't compare to a puppet that had just reached the supreme god level. After all, these puppets he killed were only half-step divine lords. If he still competed, it would be equivalent to giving 1 billion soul stones to Madman. Only a fool would do such a losing deal. Coward, Madman despised. "Don't provoke me, it's useless. If you want to compete, then let's compete in quantity." Qin Feiyang disdained. Madman rolled his eyes fiercely. If they competed in quantity, he would definitely lose. Because Qin Feiyang had already killed more puppets than him. The two of them were talking and laughing, and it didn't seem like they were fighting at all. What two arrogant brats! This sovereign wants to see how long you can laugh for. The mysterious man laughed angrily. This was simply a humiliation to him. As the mysterious man's voice fell, the ferocious beast that roared out of the black fog seemed to have its strength increased by a level. The puppet that Qin Feiyang faced was shockingly at the early divine lord realm. The madman's puppet was at the level of a lesser paragon god. They were densely packed and innumerable. He killed wave after wave. Just like a beast tide, there was no end to it. Not enough, not enough. However, Qin Feiyang felt no pressure at all. The blood-red light was magnificent and unstoppable. Looking back at the madman, the mysterious golden light was unstoppable, and he was doing the same with ease. The power of this golden light is beyond my imagination, Qin Feiyang mumbled. Of all the methods the madman had displayed, what he cared about the most was the golden light. To be able to compete with the kill formula, suddenly, a terrifying thought crept into his mind. Could it be this was also a heaven-defying technique that could allow one to break through countless realms? The glacier below was piled up with mountains of corpses. The death domain sealed the surroundings, and the pungent smell of blood couldn't disperse. All of it gathered within the domain, making one nauseous. Even in the death domain, there was already a bloody mist. You really have some ability? The more the mysterious man looked, the more surprised he became. All of a sudden, the puppet that appeared from the gray fog had its strength soared by another level. The puppet that Qin Feiyang faced was a lesser divine lord. The puppet that the madman faced was a greater paragon god. This is really satisfying. Although it's just a puppet, It's been a long time since I've killed to my heart's content." The madman laughed loudly. The golden light in his body surged and gathered in his palm. The next moment, with a loud clang, a halberd appeared, as if it was cast from gold, emitting a dazzling golden light. "Brat, I'll let you see my true means now." The madman laughed wildly, grabbed the halberd, and waved it in the air. A golden light blade suddenly swept across the sky. The puppets that appeared from the gray fog were all shattered in an instant. This, Qin Feiyang was shocked. How similar was this to the kill formula? "Are you shocked? Quickly let me see your true means." The madman laughed loudly. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, and killing intent surged in his hand. Clang! A blood-colored long sword appeared out of thin air. A monstrous, murderous aura instantly erupted from the death domain. The kill formula was fully activated. At this moment, he was like a killing god. He grabbed the blood-colored long sword and slashed out. The sword light tore the sky and split the earth. Those lesser divine lord puppets didn't have any room to resist and were torn to pieces by the sword energy. "Powerful," the madman whispered. He was indeed a fierce person. However, he had a hunch that this wasn't Qin Feiyang's full strength and there should be something hidden. Qin Feiyang also had the same feeling towards the madman. There might be more terrifying means hidden. The two of them slaughtered crazily. No matter how many puppets there were, they couldn't stop the blood-colored long sword and halberd in their hands. They were like invincible existences. But the puppets in the gray fog came wave after wave, like an undead army, and their strength was getting stronger and stronger. The puppets that the madman was facing at this moment had already reached the level of perfection god. The puppets that Qin Feiyang was facing had also reached the level of perfection god. In other words, Qin Feiyang had now crossed a major realm. But whether it was the madman or Qin Feiyang, they were invincible. Of course, they were able to do this because their opponents were all puppets. Because puppets couldn't use divine arts, couldn't activate soul-suppressing, and didn't have divine weapons. They fought purely by relying on their physical body and strength. If these puppets were replaced by living people, it would definitely be a different situation, because living people could use all kinds of methods like them. For example, divine arts, divine weapons, and so on. But even so, it could already reflect how terrifying the power of the blood-colored long sword and halberd was. However, the two of them also slowly felt the pressure. Because there were too many of them, they couldn't kill them all. If this continued, sooner or later they would be exhausted to death. And the mysterious man seemed to have the same plan, constantly summoning puppets to kill the two of them. Unknowingly, the sky began to gradually turn white. In other words, Qin Feiyang and the madman had been fighting nonstop for an entire night. The two death realms had become mountains of corpses and seas of blood. "How many puppets do you have?" The madman roared. He was already exhausted. "A lot, very fast." "You can't kill them all in a year and a half." The mysterious man laughed. "Can't kill them all in a year and a half? How many puppets do you have?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, "These beasts, did you turn them into puppets after killing them?" In this world, there is a kind of control secret technique. As long as you are controlled by this secret technique, you can instantly turn the other party into a puppet. The mysterious man said, "Control secret technique?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Could it be the puppet technique? No. Although the puppet technique could also turn the other party into a puppet, their life would not disappear. And the secret technique that the mysterious man mastered was to erase the other party's life and turn them into a corpse. It was really a vicious secret technique. But in comparison, it seemed that the puppet technique was a little more advanced. Because under the control of the puppet technique, even if the other party became a puppet, they could still use divine arts, battle souls, and so on. Of course, in terms of cruelty, the puppet technique was definitely not as good as the secret technique that the mysterious man mastered. There aren't many perfection paragon gods in the entire northern region, and you actually have so many puppets. Who exactly are you? The madman said in a deep voice. Haha. In the current ancient realm, there aren't many perfection paragon gods, but in the previous era, there were as many as dogs. The mysterious man laughed sinisterly. The previous era? Qin Feiyang and the madman looked at each other, their eyes full of surprise. That's right. Although the previous era ended 100 million years ago, the living beings of the previous era were not extinct. And I was one of them. The mysterious man said, his hoarse voice suddenly becoming incomparably old. 100 million years ago? The previous era? What are you talking about? The madman frowned. You are all too weak now and are not qualified to know these secrets. You'd better think about how to survive in the realm of death. The mysterious man laughed sinisterly. The madman said angrily, Didn't you say that you would give us a chance to live? Yes, as long as you can last a month in the realm of death, I will let you go. The mysterious man said, A month? Qin Feiyang and the madman were dumbfounded. How was this possible? They were already exhausted after one night, let alone an entire month. If they had time to rest in the middle, it would be fine. But the mysterious man did not intend to let them rest at all. Continuously killing for a month without rest, with their ability, it was simply impossible. The mysterious man was determined to exhaust them to death. Damn it. It has always been me teasing others. No one dares to tease me. You want me to kill for a month, so I will kill for a month? Give you so much face. Kid, let's go to the space treasure. Ignore him. The madman said angrily. Qin Feiyang also felt that it made sense. There was no need to be led by the nose by this person. Enter the space treasure? Then you might as well try and see if I have a way to kill you. The mysterious man sneered. Don't be scared by him, let's go. Madman angrily roared at Qin Feiyang before teleporting and disappearing without a trace. Qin Feiyang glanced at the gray castle and also disappeared in a flash. Really two disobedient young people. The mysterious man sighed. Clang! All of a sudden, the gray castle on the glacier bloomed with dazzling divine light. Immediately after, the gray divine light surged like a tide in the two realms of death. Inside the castle, Qin Feiyang immediately felt that the gray divine light was breaking the castle's defense, bit by bit and slowly penetrating. Chapter 2106. Even the castle can't block it? Qin Feiyang turned pale with fright. The gray divine light seeped in, and a strange force quickly spread in the castle. Not only Qin Feiyang himself, Fire Lotus, Mermaid Princess, and White-Eyed Wolf were also rapidly aging. This was a sign that their vitality was being robbed, and that strange force was still crazily eroding their divine souls. Little Qin Z, think of a way. If this goes on, we will all become jerky. Feiyang, no one was in the mood to cultivate in seclusion now. They all got up and looked at Qin Feiyang in horror. But there was one person who didn't have fear in her eyes, but there was a trace of anger. This person was Fire Lotus. She stared at the gray castle outside through the screen. There was a trace of hostility between her eyebrows, but Qin Feiyang and the others didn't notice it because of the mask. But suddenly, the divine light of the gray castle dissipated. That strange force also quickly receded like the tide. Do you understand now? In front of me, no matter where you hide, it's useless. Now I will count to 3. If you don't come out, then don't blame me for being merciless. 1, 2, 3. Just as the number 3 appeared, Qin Feiyang and the madman appeared in the realm of death. There was no other way. They could only come out, because even if they hid in the divine space item, they would only die. Especially Qin Feiyang. It would implicate the Mermaid Princess and the others. This was not what he wanted to see. Your divine space items are very good, but unfortunately they are all sealed and can't block my death force. The mysterious man smiled coldly. What? Sealed? Qin Feiyang looked at the madman in shock. He didn't expect that this person's divine space item was also sealed. Could it be that it was also a heaven-defying divine object, like the castle? Don't say. It was really possible. Otherwise, why would the madman keep hiding it, afraid that he would find out? The madman stared at the gray castle and said, "In other words, we have no choice." Yes, but don't blame me. You can only blame yourselves for overestimating yourselves and barging into the far west. Let's continue. The mysterious man laughed hoarsely. More puppets came out from the gray mist, letting out roars. As for the madman, he was still a perfect transcendent. However, Qin Feiyang's puppet was a half-step transcendent god. Qin Feiyang's expression changed. Bastard, he's just a perfect war god. How can he defeat a half-step paragon god? Madman roared as well. This is the price for your disobedience. If he dares to play any more tricks, he'll have to face early, minor, or even great perfection paragon puppets. The mysterious man laughed mockingly. Damn you! The madman was enraged. He grabbed the halberd and, like a demonic god, he crushed the puppets one by one and charged towards the gray castle with murderous intent. Do you think I'm a pushover? When he reached the top of the gray castle, the madman roared. He grabbed the halberd with both hands and slashed at the gray castle. Clang! A loud noise shook the clouds. The halberd shattered on the spot. However, the gray castle was not damaged at all. How is this possible? The madman stared at the gray castle in a daze. With your strength, you want to shake this divine artifact? The mysterious man's disdainful voice sounded. If I can't destroy this castle, then I'll split open this domain of death. The madman was furious. He condensed the halberd again and charged into the sky, slashing at the barrier. Boom! However, when the halberd landed on the barrier, it was as if it had hit a sponge. All the power and sharpness were dissolved by the domain of death. The madman couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness. What the hell is this thing? He didn't have time to think. Another large group of puppets charged at him. He quickly began to counterattack. Back to Qin Feiyang. In the face of a half-step peerless god puppet, he was flustered. Although the kill formula was heaven-defying and could ignore the barrier of major realms, there were already 7 minor realms between the perfect war god and the half-step supreme god. Even the kill formula was difficult to deal with. What's more, it wasn't just 1 or 2 puppets. It was a large group, countless of them. Boom! In less than 3 breaths. He was forced to activate the battle formula, the advance formula, and the return formula. But even so, he couldn't stop those puppets. Puff! Suddenly, a beast rushed behind Qin Feiyang like lightning. It raised its sharp claws and fiercely clawed at Qin Feiyang's back. The battle armor formed by the battle formula was cut open on the spot. Several bloody wounds appeared and blood gushed out, and that terrifying force even sent Qin Feiyang flying. He smashed into the glacier below, blood gushing out of his mouth. Oh no! Qin Feiyang's expression changed. The madman's expression also changed. Purple gold dragon blood exposed. That is purple gold dragon blood. How is that possible? You have purple gold dragon blood? The mysterious man's exclamation also sounded full of disbelief. Qin Feiyang climbed out of the ice and snow. He looked at the puppets in the sky, then looked at the gray castle and heaved a sigh of relief. It's good to be exposed, so I won't be restrained. Madman, hold on, I will make him pay. Qin Feiyang looked at the madman and said. He rushed into the sky, holding a blood-red long sword, and madly attacked those puppets. So what if you're a half-step supreme god? In the end, You're just puppets without consciousness." He roared angrily and slashed out with his sword. The ferocious beast that was charging at the front was actually split into two halves. Blood poured down like a waterfall. Open. Qin Feiyang's aura was like a rainbow. His long hair quickly turned blood red. With a shout, a large blood-red domain appeared. Boom! The murderous aura around him soared countless times in an instant. This was his ultimate move. Slaughter Domain. As soon as the Slaughter Domain was opened, the blood from the mountain of corpses below turned into a long blood river, flowing against the current and into the Slaughter Domain. In the end, the blood all entered the blood-red long sword in Qin Feiyang's hand. Clang! The blood-red long sword crazily devoured. Its sharpness and aura were also crazily rising. Damn! The madman looked at Qin Feiyang in horror. Was he still a human? His entire body was covered in blood, and he looked just like a god of death who had returned, especially that murderous aura, which he had never seen before in his life. Strong indeed. But I'm not bad either. Kill! The madman roared. His sky piercer was invincible, creating a sea of blood. After Qin Feiyang opened the Slaughter Domain, he became even crazier. Moreover, as the blood-red long sword absorbed more blood, its power became stronger and stronger. It became easier to kill those half-step Supreme God puppets. About 100 breaths later, the sharpness of the blood-red long sword had soared by more than 2 levels. Even those puppets were as easy as cutting vegetables. As he killed, he absorbed the blood. One had to know. He had been killing in the death domain for an entire night. This night, he didn't know that after killing the puppets, the ground below had long turned into a sea of blood, and these blood were all being crazily absorbed by him. Moreover, compared to the last time when he fought with the demon ancestor and opened the Slaughter Domain, there was a qualitative difference this time, because the lowest level of absorption this time was the blood of a perfect war god. The creatures of the Black Tortoise world couldn't compare at all. Even now, he was still absorbing the blood of half-step Supreme God. This was even more incomparable. After all, in the Black Tortoise world, the strongest was only a false god, and there were very few of them. Most of them were below the false god level. Half of them were even mortals. How could ordinary blood compare to God's blood? Naturally not. So this time, although the number wasn't as much as the last time, as long as he was given time, he could still reach the same level as the last time. Clang! As the blood-red long sword absorbed the blood, it trembled violently, as if it was very excited and happy. Its power had soared to another level. Those half-step Supreme God puppets were as easy as cutting watermelons at this moment. This time he was really crazy. Chapter 2107. Purple gold, dragon blood. The mysterious man stood in the gray castle, looking at Qin Feiyang outside, still shocked by the purple gold, dragon blood. Of course, he also saw the scene of Qin Feiyang opening the killing zone. He was also very shocked. What was the background of this boy? Not only did he have the bloodline power of the purple gold divine dragon, but he also had such a terrifying killing technique. Suddenly, he waved his hand gently. Outside, in the death zone where Qin Feiyang was, a large number of puppets at the beginner level of the immortal realm immediately emerged from the gray light fog. Looking at those puppets, Qin Feiyang's face was full of disdain. With a slash of his sword, a puppet was directly split into 2, and the blood that flowed out was all absorbed by the blood-red long sword. In less than 10 breaths, all the puppets were slaughtered. Not a drop of blood was left. Even the blood in the corpses was forcibly sucked dry. However, there was still a lot of corpses and blood piled up below. Because the absorption also needed a process, it was impossible to suck all the blood in the death zone dry in an instant. After all, he had been killing for an entire night. The puppets that died in his hands could probably be piled up into dozens of mountains. Fortunately, the death zone where he was imprisoned was big enough. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to pile up. He killed batch after batch. Suddenly, a group of puppets at the beginner level and the great perfection of the immortal realm rushed out at the same time. Qin Feiyang also seemed to be tireless, killing as many as came out as he could. Clang! The power of the blood-red long sword suddenly rose to a new level. He now had a kind of confidence. Even puppets at the great perfection of the immortal realm could be killed with one slash. What kind of killing technique is this? Its power has increased so much. Why hasn't it stopped? Could it be this kind of killing technique can be absorbed endlessly? The mysterious man was surprised. He simply summoned a large number of puppets at the great perfection of the immortal realm. There were more than 3,000 of them. That battle array could simply be described as apocalyptic. Absorbing their blood should be enough to increase the power of the killing technique to the same level as last time. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. The blood of a perfected god was far more potent than that of a perfected battle god or perfected divine lord. This was a super tonic for the kill formula. His blood-red hair fluttered in the wind as he wielded his blood-red sword and charged forward in a frenzy. Clang! Rumble! At first, it was very difficult to deal with these puppets. His body was also riddled with wounds. There were even a few times when he almost lost his life. However, as it continued to absorb and grow, the blood-red sword began to display its prowess. About half an hour passed. 3,000 golems at the Paragon level had all perished beneath his sword. Clang! After absorbing the divine blood of these puppets, the power of the blood-red longsword increased by another level. This level was no different from the last time he fought the fiend ancestor. The mountain of corpses and sea of blood below had also been completely absorbed. Not a single drop of blood could be squeezed out of those corpses. The entire barrier was filled with the aura of death, as if it was hell. Qin Feiyang lowered his head to look at the blood-red longsword and muttered, "It's time to fight back." Last time in the Sea of Reincarnation, when the blood-red longsword reached this level, even the two heaven-defying artifacts, Bloodblade and Snow, couldn't block it, let alone this gray castle. Taking a step back, even if this gray castle was also a heaven-defying artifact, the blood-red longsword could still destroy it. Are you a descendant of Qin Batian? Suddenly, the mysterious man's voice sounded. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback. He raised his head to look at the gray castle and asked in surprise, "You also know my ancestor?" "Ancestor? You really are his descendant," the mysterious man whispered. "You've seen him?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Yes, I've seen him," the mysterious man said. "When? Where is he?" Qin Feiyang was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Many years ago. As for where he is now, I'm afraid you won't be able to find him, because he has already been refined into a puppet by me." The mysterious man laughed. Refined into a puppet. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. "Qin Feiyang, don't believe his nonsense. With your ancestor's methods, even if he isn't his opponent, it's impossible for him to be refined into a puppet." Madman shouted. Qin Feiyang suddenly recovered and sneered. "That's right, my ancestor is omnipotent. How could he fall into your hands? Break for me!" With a loud shout, he raised his blood-red longsword and slashed at the death domain. Madman's eyes were filled with anticipation. "Kacha!" Accompanied by a deafening sound, under Madman's expectant gaze, the death domain finally shattered. Madman was overjoyed and shouted, "Quickly, break my domain of death!" Qin Feiyang took a step forward and slashed at the death domain that trapped Madman. "Kacha!" The death domain also shattered instantly. After the domain of death shattered, the clouds of black mist also dissipated. In other words, the mysterious man could no longer summon a puppet. "Ha ha!" Madman laughed and shouted, Let's go destroy that gray castle. Madman grabbed the halberd. Qin Feiyong grabbed the blood-red longsword. The two's aura soared into the sky as they rushed above the gray castle and shouted at the same time. Slash! The halberd and blood-red longsword slashed at the gray castle with a world-destroying sharpness. Boom! The gray castle also suddenly released a dazzling divine light. You want to destroy my main body with just the two of you? In your dreams. The mysterious man was disdainful. However, at the next moment, when the halberd and blood-red longsword fell, the gray castle was directly split in half with a deafening sound. How is this possible? The mysterious man exclaimed. His tone was no longer as arrogant as before, but with a strong sense of panic. Main body? Qin Feiyong and Madman looked at each other. Madman said in disbelief, Is there something wrong with my ears? He actually said that this gray castle is his main body? I also heard him say that. Qin Feiyong said. Could it be? The two seemed to have thought of something and immediately looked at the gray castle, their eyes shining. Main body. Originally, they all thought that this mysterious man was a living person. However, they didn't expect that he was the weapon spirit of the gray castle. For a weapon spirit to be so powerful, this gray castle must be a heaven-defying weapon. Continue. Madman shouted. Qin Feiyong nodded. Although it was a heaven-defying weapon, this time it really angered him. Clang! The two once again held the halberd and blood-red longsword and slashed at the gray castle. The halberd was still fine. The blood-red longsword emitted a sharp aura, making the weapon spirit of the gray castle almost despair. Qin Feiyong, madman, I will remember you. Just wait for me. The weapon spirit roared with resentment, and the gray castle that was cut in half immediately rose into the air. Escape? Not a chance. Qin Feiyong and Madman shouted angrily. The halberd and blood-red longsword flew out of their hands. Clang! The gray castle, which had already been cut in half, was once again divided into two halves, becoming four halves. Its speed instantly dropped by a large margin. Qin Feiyong and Madman waved their hands and recalled the blood-red longsword and the halberd. Then, using the auxiliary technique, they chased after the gray castle like lightning and blocked it from the front and back. Damn it, damn it! If I knew earlier, I would have killed you at the first moment. The weapon spirit roared again and again. There is no such thing as if you knew earlier. But we knew that even if we could hold on for a month, you would definitely not let us go in the end. Madman sneered. Clang! Qin Feiyong shook the blood-red longsword in his hand, his aura firmly locked onto the gray castle, and said, There is no medicine for regret in this world. You can only blame yourself for being careless and underestimating us. Now answer my question. Where did you see my ancestor? You don't think I'm stupid? If I tell you, do I still have a way to live? The weapon spirit sneered. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said, As long as you didn't lie to me, I can let you go. Really? The weapon spirit asked. I, Qin Feiyong, am a man of my word. Qin Feiyong said. The weapon spirit pondered for a moment and said, It seems that more than 2,000 years ago I saw him and Lu Jingyang in the deepest part of the Sky Dragon Sea. More than 2,000 years? Madman was slightly taken aback and asked suspiciously, What were they doing in the deepest part of the Sky Dragon Sea? I don't know. Qin Batian and Lu Jingyang's methods are indeed terrifying, as you said. Back then, they weren't very strong. I really wanted to refine them into puppets, but the result was the same as today. I was almost killed by them. Later, I escaped from the Sky Dragon Sea and have been hiding in the far west, but I didn't expect to meet their descendants now. The weapon spirit sighed and was a little depressed. Qin Feiyong said, So where are my ancestors now? You don't know either. But according to my estimation, they should still be in the Sky Dragon Sea. Although I don't know what they are doing, but I vaguely feel that they are planning something. The weapon's spirit said. Sky Dragon Sea, Qin Feiyang muttered and said in a deep voice. Then where did you get the potential pill and potential pill? The weapon spirit said, I snatched them from your ancestors. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang came to a realization and frowned. Then why did you nurture the youth called Long Tianyu? So you really did learn of this sovereign's existence from him. How infuriating. If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have helped him. The weapon spirit was furious. Although Long Tianyu is young, he is very righteous and did not betray you. It was because I forcefully read his memories that I learned of your existence. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. In that case, I wronged him? The weapon spirit said in a daze. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, Quickly answer my question. This sovereign is just feeling sorry for him. His parents, as well as his grandfather, actually didn't die an unnatural death. Instead, they were assassinated. The weapon's spirit sighed. What? Qin Feiyang was shocked and said, Who secretly killed them? Why did they secretly kill them? After reading Long Tianyu's memories, he knew the cause of death of Long Tianyu's parents and grandfather. They all died under the claws of fierce beasts. But he did not expect that there was actually another secret. Chapter 2108. The artifact spirit said their village chief. Village chief? Qin Feiyang and Madman looked at each other. That's right. Long Tianyu's mother wasn't from the village. She was brought back by Long Tianyu's father. She was quite beautiful. That village chief was lascivious. The moment she entered the village, he coveted her. But at that time she was pregnant. The village chief had some misgivings and didn't dare to do anything. Not long after, Long Tianyu was born. The village chief couldn't hold back anymore. He tricked Long Tianyu's mother into an ice valley at the edge of the far west land and raped her. At this point, the artifact spirit paused and said, I believe that you should know what happened without me explaining. Qin Feiyang and Madman nodded. After being humiliated, Long Tianyu's mother thought that the village chief would let her go as long as she didn't say anything. But on the contrary, not only did the village chief not let her go, he even used Long Tianyu to threaten her and forced her to submit. Later, she couldn't bear such humiliation and told Long Tianyu's father. After learning of this, Long Tianyu's father couldn't help but want to kill. But in consideration of his reputation, he didn't say anything. The couple discussed and secretly asked the village chief to go out and kill him. But the village chief was stronger than them. In the end, not only did they not succeed, they died in the village chief's hands. The artifact spirit sighed. They're worse than beasts. Madman said angrily. Qin Feiyang also couldn't help but be angry. He asked what happened later. Later, the village chief returned to the village and painfully told everyone that the couple had been clawed by ferocious beasts. He pretended to be a good person and took good care of Long Tianyu and Long Tianyu's grandfather. And the grandfather and grandson, who didn't know, were grateful to him. But one day, Long Tianyu's grandfather suddenly found a secret compartment in the house. There was a letter in the secret compartment. It was left behind by Long Tianyu's parents before they died. It was precisely because they were afraid of failure that they wrote down all the evil deeds of the village chief and hid them in the hidden compartment. After knowing the true cause of his son and daughter-in-law's death, Long Tianyu's grandfather was filled with grief. But he's just an ordinary old man. He's powerless to take revenge. Furthermore, the village chief is usually a nice guy in the village. Even if he were to announce the letter, no one would necessarily believe him. After much consideration, he thought of poisoning. But the result was obvious. He also failed and was killed by the village chief instead. Moreover, it was faked that he died under the claws of a vicious beast. In that case, Long Tianyu will truly become an orphan. The artifact spirit said. Madman asked, "Does Long Tianyu know about this?" Before the artifact spirit could speak, Qin Feiyang said, "He doesn't know because I didn't read any of his memories." Yes, Long Tianyu doesn't know. Even now, he still thinks that the village chief is sincerely taking care of him. The artifact spirit said. Qin Feiyang asked, "Then how did you know? And how did you know it so clearly?" The artifact spirit said, "I was bored and suddenly encountered this matter. I felt that it was quite interesting, so I paid special attention to it." Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Then why didn't you help them?" "Help? Based on what? They're just a bunch of ants. Are they worthy of this sovereign's help?" The artifact spirit's tone was full of disdain. "If that's the case, then why did you help Long Tianyu?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. This sovereign was moved by his perseverance. He entered the far west several times to search for opportunities and good fortune. The willpower he displayed during this period made this sovereign somewhat impressed. Later, he couldn't bear the invasion of the cold current and fainted on the snow. This sovereign couldn't bear it and kindly helped him. As for the truth, it was too big of a blow for a child of his age. Therefore, this sovereign has been hiding it from him. I wanted to wait for him to grow up before telling him, so that he can personally avenge his family. The artifact spirit said with a hint of doting love for Long Tianyu. Qin Feiyang said, "It seems that you have developed feelings for Long Tianyu after being together with him for so many years." "Yes. This child is sensible and obedient. He has always called me grandpa. As time passed, this sovereign began to treat him like a grandson. Otherwise, this sovereign wouldn't have given him the potential elixir and potential elixir, nor would I have nurtured him wholeheartedly." The artifact spirit said, "Since you care so much about him, why didn't you keep him by your side? You must know that if you let him return to the village, he might be killed by the village chief." Qin Feiyang said, "He's a child after all. How lonely would it be to let him stay here alone? He's a child. He must have a good childhood. That's why this sovereign let him return to the village." As for the village chief, this sovereign had secretly planted a wisp of death energy in his body 2 years ago. As long as he has the intention to kill Long Tianyu, this sovereign will be able to sense it immediately. The artifact spirit said. "A good childhood," Qin Feiyang muttered. Inexplicably, he couldn't help but envy Long Tianyu, because everyone wanted to have a good childhood, but they might not be able to do so, just like him. Although after being expelled from the imperial capital, Uncle Yuan had always been by his side. However, his heart had never been at peace for a single day. Since 10 years ago, he had been burdened with hatred, suffering, and torment. But Long Tianyu was different. Although Long Tianyu's background was also very miserable, he didn't know the truth now. He was still the same as before. He was an innocent child, enjoying the good childhood that a child should have. Moreover, there was also the gray castle silently protecting him. So in comparison, Long Tianyu was much happier than him. The artifact spirit suddenly said, "You are the descendant of Qin Batian. Then you should also have the pill formulas for the potential elixir." Qin Feiyang nodded. The artifact spirit was overjoyed and quickly said, "Then how about we discuss a condition?" "What condition?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "As the descendant of Qin Batian, your situation in the northern region is definitely not very good. However, this sovereign can help you. With this sovereign strength, even if you are facing the 2 palace masters and the 10 great elders of the 9 heavens palace, this sovereign can help you kill a bloody path. Furthermore, this sovereign can protect you and enter the heavenly dragon sea to search for the whereabouts of Qin Batian and Lu Zhenyang." The artifact spirit said proudly. Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. It was already very obvious that this gray castle was definitely a heaven-defying divine artifact. If the gray castle really helped him, then in the future he would have more confidence in the Nine Heavens Palace. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang asked, "What is your condition?" The artifact spirit said, "Help this sovereign to nurture Long Tianyu." It's that simple? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes, the artifact spirit said. Qin Feiyang frowned. With your ability, you shouldn't need me to help you nurture him, right? That's true. Although your killing technique is heaven-defying, whether it is cultivation or experience, compared to this sovereign, they are far inferior. However, this sovereign only has a little potential pill and a few other potential pills. I don't have any other pills that can open the gate of potential, the artifact spirit said. So that's the case. Qin Feiyang was enlightened. Madman suddenly transmitted his voice. Kid, be careful. This might be a stalling tactic. A stalling tactic? Qin Feiyang was shocked. If not for Madman's reminder, he would have forgotten that the slaughter domain had a time limit. The slaughter domain could only be maintained for an hour. More than half of it had already passed. In other words, there was not much time left for the slaughter domain to open. Once the slaughter domain ended, he would undoubtedly become a lamb again, unless it recognized him as its master or controlled him. However, he had no way to forcefully recognize or control such a heaven-defying divine artifact. Wait a minute. The fact that the slaughter domain had a time limit, other than himself and the people around him, no one else knew about it. Therefore, as long as he didn't say anything, Grey Castle would probably think that he could open the slaughter domain at any time. As such, Grey Castle naturally wouldn't dare to act rashly. That wouldn't do. The artifact spirit had witnessed the entire process of opening the slaughter domain. Even if he didn't know that the slaughter domain had a time limit, he must have seen that the slaughter domain needed to absorb a large amount of blood to display its power. With Grey Castle strength, it was completely capable of killing him while he was in the process of opening the slaughter domain and absorbing blood. In other words, if he didn't take the opportunity to destroy Grey Castle now, anything could happen in the future. However, wasn't it too much of a pity to destroy such a heaven-defying divine artifact? Was there any way to get the best of both worlds? What? You don't believe this sovereign's words, and are afraid that this sovereign will plot against you? Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't speak for a long time, the artifact spirit was suspicious. Yes, Qin Feiyang didn't deny it, because there was no need. I didn't expect you to be such a vigilant person. How about this? This sovereign will let you recognize me as your master first. When we find Qin Batian and Lu Zhenyang, you can remove the blood contract. The artifact spirit said. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he looked at the Grey Castle with an astonished expression. It actually took the initiative to recognize him as its master. Hey, do you think I don't exist? When Madman heard these words, he couldn't sit still because it was obvious that Grey Castle didn't play any tricks. They were sincere in wanting to help Qin Feiyang. Then he couldn't continue to stand idly by. After all, it was a heaven-defying divine artifact. Such a big advantage. How could he give it to Qin Feiyang? You have an opinion? The artifact spirit was suspicious. Of course. Look at me. In terms of talent, I'm stronger than Qin Feiyang. In terms of status, I'm also higher than Qin Feiyang. If you follow me, I guarantee that you'll live a good life. As for training Long Tianyu, that's not a problem for me. It's as simple as drinking tea and chatting. Madman said. Qin Feiyang's face turned black. This was clearly trying to poach him. The artifact spirit pondered for a while and said, It seems to make sense, but can you refine pills like the potential pill? Madman was quite happy at first, but when he heard the second half of the sentence, he shrank back. He didn't even have the pill recipe, let alone refining these pills. Moreover, even if he had the pill recipe, he couldn't refine it. Because he wasn't an alchemist at all. If you can't refine it, why are you still interrupting? Get lost. The artifact spirit shouted ruthlessly. Chapter 2109. The madman's expression stiffened. Although I can't refine it with my face, what kind of pill can I get? The artifact spirit said, Is that so? Of course. The madman nodded and pointed at Qin Feiyang. If you don't believe me, ask this kid. If I ask him for a pill, will he not give it to me? Qin Feiyang grinned and looked at the madman. Sorry, what did you say? I don't understand. A row of black lines appeared on the madman's forehead. He glared at Qin Feiyang and roared, Can't you cooperate? If it's the truth, I will definitely cooperate with you. But bragging, forget it. We have to be honest people. Qin Feiyang chuckled. You want me to cooperate with you when you're trying to steal my woman? Do you think I'm stupid? The madman gritted his teeth in anger. Is there a need to do this? Yesterday, before entering the land of the far west, didn't you say that if there is any treasure, you will give it to me? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. What I mean is ordinary treasures. But this isn't ordinary treasure. This is a heaven-defying artifact. It might even control the power of laws. The madman thought. Qin Feiyang said, Fine, let's be fair and let the artifact spirit choose. If the artifact spirit chooses, it will definitely choose you. The madman was furious. If he could refine a pill that could open the door of potential, then he had an absolute chance of winning. Then you can't blame me. Who told you not to be an alchemist? Qin Feiyang smiled proudly. The madman was furious. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have brought this guy along. Qin Feiyang looked at the gray castle and said, You said it yourself. I didn't force you. Yes, but let's talk about the ugly things first. If you don't help me break the blood contract when I find Qin Batian and Lu Jinyang, I will take you down with me, even if I have to destroy my own body. The artifact spirit snorted coldly, his tone filled with a bone-piercing chill. All right, it's a deal. Qin Feiyang cut his finger, and a drop of purple-gold dragon blood seeped out and entered the gray castle. The artifact spirit really didn't resist. Very soon, the master recognition process was complete. Qin Feiyang finally let out a sigh of relief and closed the slaughter domain. The blood-red sword in his hand also dissipated. As soon as the slaughter domain disappeared, the bone-piercing cold current surged violently. Madman pursed his lips and formed a barrier to protect Qin Feiyang. He was very reluctant to do so, because right now he was very depressed. He had spent so much effort, but in the end he didn't get anything. Instead, it all went to Qin Feiyang. Just thinking about it made him unhappy. However, if Qin Feiyang really froze to death here, it would be troublesome. Thank you. Qin Feiyang smiled. Scram! Madman shouted coldly. Just looking at it made him angry. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He turned to look at the gray castle and asked, Your main body should be able to repair itself, right? Of course. The artifact spirit said proudly. Qin Feiyang said again, Then can you let us take a look inside your main body? He was very curious about the inside of the gray castle. You are now considered this sovereign's master. If you want to go in, it's just a thought. There is no need to get this sovereign's permission, right? The artifact spirit was a little speechless. Isn't this a form of respect for you? Qin Feiyang laughed. Respect? The artifact spirit was stunned and laughed hoarsely. This is the first time this sovereign has heard that a human would respect an artifact spirit. You are indeed different. All right, after this sovereign has repaired my main body, I will let you go in and take a look. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then this sovereign will borrow your body. After the artifact spirit said that, the gray castle quickly shrank and entered Qin Feiyang's body in an instant. It floated in his qi sea and flickered with a hazy light. This is really infuriating. Madman stared at Qin Feiyong with a face full of envy and jealousy. This is my character. In this matter, your character is still not as good as mine. Qin Feiyong laughed. Look at how cocky you are, Madman said with a face full of contempt. But you can't let this daddy come here for nothing, right? What do you want? Qin Feiyong asked with a smile. After obtaining the gray castle, he was in a good mood. You have to give this daddy something. How about this? Give this daddy your spatial divine item. This daddy doesn't mind, Madman said. You don't mind? I can't bear to. Don't even think about it. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. He knew that this guy wanted the black tortoise world. It's just a spatial divine item. Is there a need for you? Madman despised. Qin Feiyong waved his hand impatiently and said, Okay, stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and go back. How could Madman be willing? He had to get some benefits. Qin Feiyong said angrily, I say, what do you want? What's the point of being so wishy-washy for a man? Do you know that this is a classic example of taking advantage of others? Madman was instantly furious. Qin Feiyong smiled embarrassedly and said, Okay, this time I owe you a favor. If you need anything in the future, just come and find me. After all, it was Madman who brought him to the far west land. He also did his best on the way. As a person, he couldn't only care about himself. That's more like it. Madman's anger subsided a lot. Then, with Qin Feiyong, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared like lightning. In the evening, two figures flew out of the far west land. It was Qin Feiyong and Madman. Madman asked, Are we going back now? To see Tianyu. A hoarse voice sounded from Qin Feiyong's body. It was the artifact spirit. Madman sneered. You are quite concerned about him. The artifact spirit ignored him and asked, Are you going back to Nine Heaven Palace next? Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then, do you want to bring Long Tianyu with you? I don't feel at ease leaving him here alone. The artifact spirit was worried. This? Qin Feiyong turned to look at Madman. This won't do. The rules of Nine Heaven Palace are that one must be at least a war god and pass the official test to enter Nine Heaven Palace. Madman shook his head. This, the artifact spirit, was hesitant. How about this? Let's ask his opinion first, and see if he wants to stay in the village or go with us. Qin Feiyong said, Okay. The artifact spirit replied. Qin Feiyong retracted his aura, opened an altar, and teleported to the sky above the village. In the evening, the village was brightly lit. Many people were taking a walk outside to enjoy the shade. Children were also playing happily. However, they couldn't find Long Tianyu in the village. Where did he go? Qin Feiyong frowned. Shua, the gray castle appeared and said, This noble one guesses that he must be cultivating in a secret room in his home. Secret room? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Yes, I've warned him that when he cultivates, he must find a secluded place, because I gave him a lot of battle chi pills, and they were all battle chi pills with 5 veins and above. If other people in the village saw these battle chi pills, especially the village chief, they would definitely be greedy. So when he came back from the far west, he dug a secret room under his bedroom. At night, he would cultivate in the secret room. The artifact spirit said. When Qin Feiyong heard this, he carefully looked at Long Tianyu's memories that he had read. There was indeed such a thing. After reading the memories, he also knew where Long Tianyu's home was. Shua. He took a step and instantly landed in a remote corner on the left side of the village. There was a small wooden house in this corner. There was only one floor. It was very shabby. There were no other houses within a few hundred meters. It seemed a little lonely. This was Long Tianyu's home. In fact, Long Tianyu didn't live here in the past. His family originally lived not far from the entrance of the village. There were many neighbors. It was only after his grandfather passed away that he moved here. On one hand, it was to be able to cultivate in peace. On the other hand, because of the death of his parents and grandfather, his personality became a little lonely. He didn't like to live too close to others. Let's go. Qin Feiyong smiled. But just as Qin Feiyong, Madman, and the Grey Castle were about to walk out of the small wooden house, a black shadow suddenly flew over from afar. Qin Feiyong and Madman frowned. If this black shadow was out in the open, they wouldn't think too much about it. However, that black shadow was very sneaky. It didn't make the slightest bit of sound. Who is he? Madman was suspicious. He is the village chief of this village. The voice of the artifact, spirit, resounded in their minds. Qin Feiyong and Madman's hearts trembled. The village chief was sneaky. It definitely wasn't anything good. Madman secretly said, "This kind of scum, why don't we directly kill him?" "Wait first. Let's see what he wants to do." Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice. Qin Feiyong and Madman and the Grey Castle were standing not far away from the small wooden house, but the black shadow didn't notice them at all. After all, their cultivation was too high. Even if they stood behind the village chief might not notice them. Finally, the village chief rushed to the door of the small wooden house. He didn't knock on the door, nor did he make any sound. Through the crack of the door, it seemed like he was looking at the situation inside the hall. Qin Feiyong and Madman finally saw the village chief's face clearly. It was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He was about 8 meters tall and had a slender figure. His face was gentle and didn't seem to have any hostility. Don't say. Just from his appearance, if they didn't know about this person's evil deeds beforehand, Qin Feiyong and Madman wouldn't have thought that the village chief was an ugly person. "Let's go over," Qin Feiyong secretly said. The two and the Grey Castle silently appeared behind the village chief. They didn't make a sound. They were just inches away. Not only did the village chief not feel the danger behind him, he kept muttering. He disappeared in one night. Where did this little bastard hide to cultivate? And he improved so quickly. If there's nothing fishy about this, I'll chop off my head and feed it to the dogs. The village chief only had the cultivation of a 5-star combat emperor, while Qin Feiyong and Madman and the Grey Castle were at least perfect combat gods. As long as they retracted their aura and didn't take the initiative to say anything, the village chief would never discover them. Strange, the village chief muttered to himself, then turned around and walked towards the window of the bedroom. Qin Feiyong and Madman and the Grey Castle also turned around when the village chief turned around. They always maintained the angle of standing behind the village chief. Chapter 2110. Walking to the window of the bedroom, the village chief looked at the closed window and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he raised his hand and gently pushed it open. There was an oil lamp inside. The candlelight flickered, making the bedroom seem a little dark. The bedroom was also very simple. Apart from a shabby desk, there was only a wooden bed. However, it was very neat and clean. On the wooden bed, a 13-year-old boy was lying on his side, covered with a blanket and sleeping soundly. He didn't cultivate. The Grey Castle spirit was a little surprised. After all, he is still young. If we let him cultivate every night, how can his body bear it? Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice. That makes sense. The spirit muttered. He is actually sleeping today. The village chief looked at the boy on the wooden bed with a stunned expression. Obviously, this wasn't the first time he came to monitor Long Tanyu. Madman secretly said, "This person has long been suspicious of Long Tanyu. If he continues to stay in the village, I am afraid he will be in danger sooner or later. This lord thinks so too. This bastard is worse than a pig or a dog. If not for wanting to let Tanyu deal with him himself, I really want to kill him now." The spirit transmitted his voice. his tone carrying a dense, killing intent. Time passed bit by bit. After waiting for about half an hour, the village chief still didn't see Long Tianyu wake up. Seems like there won't be any harvest tonight. What a waste of time. I might as well have a good time with Long Dayu's wife. Speaking of that woman, my heart itches. She is even more interesting than this little bastard's mother. Wait, it seems that Long Dayu went to the town yesterday and will only be back after a few days. This is a good opportunity. Let's go find that slut now. With that, the village chief had a lewd smile on his face as he turned around and left quickly. Indeed a bastard. Madman's face was filled with disgust. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he turned to look at the gray castle and transmitted his voice. You chat with Long Tianyu. I will follow the village chief to take a look. Others are going to have fun. What are you going to look for? Peeping? I really didn't expect you to be so wretched at such a young age. The artifact spirit said disdainfully. Qin Feiyang's face twitched as he said in annoyance. I'm just going to see if that big fish Long's wife was also forced. What are you thinking about? I see. The artifact spirit smiled awkwardly and said, Then you go. We'll meet at the village entrance. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at the gray castle and turned around to chase after the village chief. I'm going to join in the fun too. Madman chuckled and quickly chased after him. Human men are indeed beasts. The gray castle said disdainfully, then turned into a stream of light and flew into the bedroom, following closely. A gray figure flew out from the gray castle. It was the artifact spirit, Tianyu. Unable to see his true appearance, the artifact spirit walked to the bedside and pushed Long Tianyu. Long Tianyu immediately got up with a start, his little face full of vigilance. But when she saw the artifact spirit, her little face immediately lit up with joy as she called out, Grandpa Hui! Brat, you slept quite soundly. The artifact spirit laughed hoarsely, full of doting. Isn't this too tiring? That's why I want to rest. Grandpa Hui, I'm not slacking off. I usually work very hard. Look at me now. I've already broken through to the 3-star War Emperor. I've also completely grasped the perfect battle art that you gave me. If you don't believe me, I'll show you a few moves. Long Tianyu raised his head and said in a fluster. All right, what's there to show? Grandpa didn't blame you. This time, Grandpa came over to tell you something. Grandpa will be going to the 9-Heaven Palace later. I'm afraid I won't be able to see you in the future. Grandpa wants to ask you, do you want to go with Grandpa? The artifact spirit asked with a smile. 9-Heaven Palace? Long Tianyu was slightly startled, and his little face was immediately filled with excitement and yearning. Obviously, he had long heard of the existence of the 9-Heaven Palace from the artifact spirit. However, after the excitement, he was somewhat hesitant. Don't worry. Take your time to think about it. Grandpa won't force you. The artifact spirit laughed. When interacting with Long Tianyu, there wasn't the slightest bit of hostility. A dignified, heaven-defying artifact, no. To be exact, it should be considered a heaven-defying demon. A demon actually had such a gentle side. It was truly hard to imagine. On the other side, Qin Feiyang and Madman were like two ghosts, following not far behind the village chief. Why are you following us? Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Fuck. Wherever I go is my freedom. Why do you care? Madman raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyang looked at him helplessly, turned his head to look at the village chief's back, and secretly said, Tell me, if that Long Dayu's wife was also forced, what should we do? Nonsense. Of course we should castrate him, chop him into 8 pieces, and feed him to the dogs. Madman sneered. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said in surprise, I didn't expect you to hate evil so much. What do you mean? Madman was slightly startled and frowned. Am I usually very hateful? No. Very domineering, very invincible. Qin Feiyong hurriedly smiled. Madman smiled proudly and said proudly, "As a person, you have to be domineering, otherwise you will only be bullied." "That's true." Qin Feiyong nodded. "Speaking of which, what was the domain you opened in the far west this morning?" Madman looked curiously at Qin Feiyong. "Slaughter domain." Qin Feiyong didn't hide it. "Slaughter domain." Madman was startled and frowned. "I seem to have heard that during the test you were at the bottom of the sky stairway and were troubled by Feng Wenhai. So you also opened this slaughter domain." Qin Feiyong nodded and said contemptuously, "If it wasn't for Shangguan Fenglan's appearance, Feng Wenhai would have already become a ghost under my sword." Madman was stunned and said with a playful smile, "This Feng Wenhai probably still doesn't know that Shangguan Fenglan indirectly saved his life. Don't just talk about me. When are you going to show me your true trump card?" Qin Feiyong secretly said, "Me. The methods I showed in the morning are all of my strength." Madman chuckled. "Do you think I will believe you?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him. Madman pouted and said lightly, "Forget it if you don't believe me." About 10 breaths later, the village chief looked around and turned into an alley. Qin Feiyong and Madman also followed in. Not long after, the village chief stopped in front of a house and looked around sneakily. Seeing that there was no one around, he gently knocked on the door. Not long after, the door opened. A woman appeared in his line of sight. The woman was about 30 years old, and although she was dressed very plainly, her figure was quite good, and she was still charming. "It's you." When the woman saw the village chief, her face turned pale, and she quickly closed the door. However, the village chief quickly raised his hand and pushed the door open, and even the woman was forced back a few steps. Then the village chief walked in and closed the door behind him. "What are you doing?" The woman was terrified. "Longdeyu is not here. What are you doing? Also, keep your voice down. Don't let the neighbors hear you." The village chief leaned against the door, holding his chin, and his eyes unscrupulously scanned the woman's body. The woman's face was pale, and she suddenly knelt on the ground and begged, "Please let me go, okay? I don't want to let you down." Hearing this, the village chief rushed over angrily and slapped the woman's face. "It's your fortune that I like you. Don't be so shameless. Besides, it's not our first time. If you want to say that you've let down Longdeyu, you've already let him down." After the village chief finished speaking, he sat on a chair in the hall and said with a smile, "Crawl over here." The woman didn't seem to hear it, and she was paralyzed there in despair. "Didn't you hear me? Do you want me to kill Longdeyu?" "Okay, once Longdeyu is dead, I can come to find you even more unscrupulously. You know that I have the ability. After all, my son is now a disciple of Nine Heaven Palace." The village chief laughed. "What? His son is also a disciple of Nine Heaven Palace?" Inside the black tortoise world, Qin Feiyong and Madman looked at each other. After the village chief closed the door, they naturally couldn't directly barge in. Therefore, Qin Feiyong brought Madman into the black tortoise world, and then sneaked into the hall without anyone noticing. Because of this, they heard every word of the village chief. "Don't kill Deyu." At the same time, the woman's body stiffened, and she hurriedly looked at the village chief and shouted, "Then crawl over here. As long as you serve me well, I guarantee that Longdeyu will be safe." The village chief said. The woman crawled toward the village chief in despair, her eyes filled with tears. The village chief looked at the woman with a face of satisfaction. "Preposterous, preposterous. This beast is simply the shame of my northern region." Madman was furious. Not only did he take someone else's wife, he even threatened him so blatantly. This was intolerable. Qin Feiyong's heart was also burning with anger. The village chief didn't realize that danger was coming. He lay on the chair and said, "Take off your clothes and crawl onto me." The woman sobbed and could only begin to undress. How impressive! But at this moment, a cold and bone-chilling voice sounded. Following closely, two figures appeared out of thin air in the hall. It was Qin Feiyang and Madman. "Who is it?" The village chief suddenly stood up. The woman also retreated to the side in panic. "The person who wants your life." Madman laughed sinisterly. "It's you guys." The village chief looked at the two and said in shock and anger, "Yesterday, when Qin Feiyang and Madman broke into the village and read Long Tanyu's memories, the village chief was actually present. But at that time he didn't say anything. He even hoped that Qin Feiyang could kill Long Tanyu. So, when he saw Qin Feiyang and Madman's faces, he immediately recognized them. "Yes, it's us." Madman took a step forward and instantly landed in front of the village chief. Then he stretched out his arm like lightning and grabbed the village chief's neck. The village chief wanted to resist, but he was shocked to find that the young man's strength was too great. He couldn't move at all. At the same time, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and condensed a barrier that covered the entire hall. The next movement would definitely be a bit big, so it was better to soundproof it so as not to alarm the other people in the village. After all, this wasn't something to be proud of. "You dare to touch me? Do you know who my son is?" The village chief roared in horror. The madman shouted, "Then do you know who I am?" The village chief looked at Madman and sneered, "Looking at you, I know that you must be a little boy. And my son is a disciple of Nine Heaven Palace. You can never afford to offend him." Chapter 2111. Disciple of Nine Heaven Palace. I can't afford to offend them? Madman was stunned. He even said that he was just a small fry. What? Are you afraid? No matter how strong you are, can you be compared to the disciples of Nine Heaven Palace? Let me go right now, kneel on the ground and apologize to me. Otherwise, when I tell my son, you will all die. The village chief looked at Madman and Qin Feiyang with disdain. Madman was stunned. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything, so he thought that the two were afraid. All of a sudden, he became arrogant and inflated. "Haha," Madman laughed. Was there anyone in Nine Heaven Palace that he couldn't afford to offend? He probably wasn't even born yet. Qin Feiyang also laughed. Ignorance was really scary. Madman was someone who dared to kill in front of everyone in Nine Heaven Palace. Why would he care about a mere disciple? Even if it was an earth and heaven ranking disciple, he would kill them without hesitation. Why aren't you letting me go? Do you believe that I won't tell my son to wipe out your entire family? The village chief roared. Interesting, interesting. I really want to see what kind of person your son really is. What gave you the courage to say that you will wipe out my entire family? Madman laughed and punched the village chief in the stomach. He then let go, and the village chief fell to the ground, holding his stomach as he cried out in pain. "You are dead. I will immediately send a message to my son." "Just you wait." The village chief roared with hatred. "No need to be so troublesome. I will directly bring you to Nine Heaven Palace." Madman grinned. The village chief was stunned. Directly to Nine Heaven Palace? Were these two also disciples of Nine Heaven Palace? Madman grabbed the village chief and looked at Qin Feiyang. "Let's go!" Qin Feiyang glanced at the woman and said, "You go first. I will find you at the entrance of the village later." Madman was startled and asked suspiciously, "Why are you staying? Don't tell me you've also taken a fancy to her." He quickly moved to Qin Feiyang's side and said in a low voice, "Brother, your appetite is a bit too heavy. Although this woman is indeed somewhat beautiful, she's already quite old and she's someone else's wife." This. The more Qin Feiyang listened, the more he felt that something was amiss. Did she think that he stayed because of this woman's beauty? His face instantly darkened, and he said angrily, "Scram!" What was he thinking about all day long? All right, all right, all right. As long as you're happy. The madman waved his hand, grabbed the village chief, and left. Before leaving, he didn't forget to look at Qin Feiyong with disdain. Your thoughts are not pure. Qin Feiyong was helpless. He walked to the woman and said with a smile, "Get up!" The woman also retreated in a fluster, because she had also heard what the madman had said before. Don't worry, I don't have any thoughts about you. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly. Did he lack beauties? He never lacked beauties. How could he do such a thing? She underestimated Qin Feiyong too much. Hearing this, the woman didn't relax. Her face was still full of panic. Qin Feiyong shook his head helplessly and said, I believe you also know that this matter is not glorious, so it's best to hide it from your husband. But the village chief, the woman said, don't worry, from now on he will disappear without a trace. But you have to keep your mouth shut about what happened tonight. In other words, even if someone asks you about the village chief's whereabouts in the future, you have to pretend that you don't know anything, understand? Qin Feiyong said, Yes, yes. The woman nodded repeatedly. All right then, live well. Don't feel sorry for your husband. After all, you were forced to do this. Qin Feiyong smiled. Thank you, the woman said gratefully. She slowly realized that the young man in front of her did not have any malicious intentions. Instead, he was enlightening her and teaching her how to deal with the aftermath. Qin Feiyong smiled and turned to leave. Outside the village, beside the stream. When Qin Feiyong arrived, he only saw Madman and the village chief. Madman had an angry smile on his face. The village chief's attitude was also very arrogant. Qin Feiyong glanced at the village chief, then looked at Madman and said, He's still arrogant. How can you use the word arrogant to describe him? He doesn't put Madman in his eyes at all. Madman said angrily. Qin Feiyong glanced at the village chief and smiled. I have to admit, your guts are really big. Is it very funny? You just wait and see. When we reach Nine Heaven's palace, you will be like him, kneeling in front of my son and begging for mercy. The village chief looked at Qin Feiyong and sneered. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Can't you see that we are also disciples of Nine Heaven's palace? So what can you compare to my son? The village chief said proudly. Qin Feiyong's expression froze and asked curiously, Then dare I ask, what rank is your son in Nine Heaven's palace? If I tell you, you will be scared to death. The village chief said. Qin Feiyong smiled. Then tell us. Let's see if you can scare us to death. Listen well, my son is now an earth-ranking disciple of Nine Heaven's palace, ranked 10th. The village chief said with a face full of arrogance. Qin Feiyong was stunned again. Earth ranking 10th? At most, he was just a perfect war god, and he thought he was strong. Afraid, but it's too late. I will definitely make you pay the price for offending me. The village chief sneered. Qin Feiyong nodded. Yes, 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 we are afraid, we are afraid. You are a great person. Don't bother with us. The village chief was even more proud. However, he didn't notice that Madman's eyes were filled with disdain. He didn't even put a heaven-ranking disciple in his eyes, let alone an earth-ranking disciple. Of course, this village chief did have the right to be arrogant. After all, an earth-ranking disciple had a certain status in Nine Heaven's palace. Qin Feiyong was too lazy to talk nonsense with the village chief. He looked around and asked Madman, They still haven't arrived? Madman nodded. So, but before he finished, the gray castle brought Long Tianyu with it as it broke through the air and landed in front of Qin Feiyong and Long Tianyu. And when the village chief saw Long Tianyu, he was stunned. When Long Tianyu saw the village chief, a trace of surprise appeared on his face. But when he saw Qin Feiyong and Madman, he panicked and shouted, Grandpa Gray, yesterday it was them. Grandpa knows what happened yesterday. That was just a misunderstanding. The gray castle's spirit laughed. What? It can actually speak. The village chief looked at the gray castle with his mouth agape. The gray castle ignored him and smiled at Long Tianyu. Tianyu, they're the two big brothers that Grandpa told you about. From now on, follow them and listen to them. Do you understand? Long Tianyu looked at the two of them in fear. Yesterday, when Qin Feiyang controlled him and read his memories, it made him wish he was dead. So until now he was still a little afraid. Don't be afraid. They are my friends. Yesterday, they didn't know about our relationship. The gray castle said. I see. Long Tianyu nodded his head. He looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman and smiled politely. Hello, big brothers. Qin Feiyang smiled. Madman pouted and looked at the gray castle. Is it over? If it is, we will return to Nine Heavens Palace. Wait, what is going on with him? The artifact spirit asked. It seemed like he was talking about the village chief. Madman said expressionlessly, he is doing something immoral again. So I couldn't take it anymore and attacked. You really won't change. That's good. Once we get rid of this problem, everything is over. The artifact spirit said. He wanted to let Long Tianyu deal with him. But now that Madman and Qin Feiyang attacked, there was nothing he could say. Moreover, it was good to get rid of such a person, in case he harmed others. Then, I will leave Tianyu to you. Right, I didn't tell Tianyu about your true identity. The gray castle said to Qin Feiyang in secret. Then it entered Qin Feiyang's body and continued to repair its body. Let's go. Qin Feiyang looked at Long Tianyu and then at Madman. Madman waved his hand and opened an altar. He grabbed the village chief and jumped up. Qin Feiyang carried Long Tianyu and landed beside Madman. Long Tianyu looked at the village chief and then at Qin Feiyang and asked, Big brother, is Grandpa village chief going to Nine Heaven Palace too? Yes. He made a mistake and is going to Nine Heaven Palace to be punished. Qin Feiyang smiled. What mistake did he make? Grandpa village chief is a good person. Long Tianyu didn't understand. Qin Feiyang rubbed Long Tianyu's head and smiled. This is a matter between us adults. A kid like you shouldn't interfere. Oh, Long Tianyu nodded. After opening dozens of altars, the four of them finally arrived at the bottom of the stairway. This is Nine Heaven Palace? Long Tianyu looked at the stairway curiously. Qin Feiyang nodded. Madman looked at the village chief and grinned. Old fart, just you wait. You will see your son soon. The village chief laughed coldly. Then it will be the time of your death. Ha! Madman laughed. He grabbed the village chief and stepped onto the stairway. Whoa! The stairway buzzed. This was because the village chief wasn't someone from Nine Heaven Palace, so the stairway gave off a warning. The white-haired old man sitting beside the stairway suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Madman. Outsiders aren't allowed to enter Nine Heaven Palace. Madman's expression froze. He turned to look at the white-haired old man and said unhappily, Old man, is there a need to be so strict? This is the rule. The white-haired old man said indifferently. Make an exception. Madman smiled. He seemed to be afraid of the white-haired old man. No, the white-haired old man shook his head. Ha, and here I was thinking how powerful you were. You can't even order a gatekeeper old man around. If it was my son, would he not give face? The village chief sneered mercilessly. Gatekeeper old man. Qin Feiyang and Madman were stunned. This person really wasn't afraid of death. Did he know how strong this old man was? The white-haired old man glanced at the village chief, but there wasn't any anger on his face. It was as if nothing could affect his indifferent state of mind. Old man, I really have something to do. Can you make an exception? Madman looked at the white-haired old man and said, Look, he's not giving you face. If you don't have the ability, then don't be arrogant. The village chief laughed. Chapter 21:12. Shut up! Madman slapped village chief's face with the back of his hand. He was already annoyed, but the village chief didn't know what was good for him and kept nagging at the side. Wasn't he looking for a beating? Little bastard, you hit me. Just you wait, you're dead. Even if the heavens come down, they won't be able to save you. The village chief roared. The white-haired old man looked at the village chief curiously and asked, Frenzy, where did you bring this mad dog back from? Old thing, what did you say? A guard dog dares to be so rude to me. Do you know who my son is? Do you believe that I'll get my son to kill you later? The village chief stared at the white-haired old man and roared. Seeing this scene, Frenzy and Qin Feiyang looked at each other. He actually scolded. He must be tired of living. The white-haired old man looked at the village chief and then at Frenzy. I'll make an exception this time and let you bring him in. Thank you. Frenzy laughed and immediately grabbed Frenzy and flew up. Qin Feiyang led Long Tianyu to the white-haired old man and asked, Senior, what about this child? Him. The white-haired old man sized up Long Tianyu and pondered for a moment before saying, At most 1 day. Thank you, Senior. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and expressed his gratitude. Then he gave Long Tianyu a meaningful glance. Long Tianyu might be young, but he was very sensible. He immediately understood and bowed to the white-haired old man. Thank you, Grandpa. The white-haired old man gave a rare smile and then closed his eyes, ignoring Qin Feiyang and Frenzy. Let's go. Qin Feiyang pulled Long Tianyu and walked up the stairway. The moment Long Tianyu walked up the stairway started to give off a warning. And the higher they went, the louder the sound became. Finally, the sound of the stairway was like a bell that resounded in the sky above the 9-heaven palace. What's going on? This is the stairway's warning. Did someone barge into the 9-heaven palace? That's not right. The stairway to heaven is guarded. How could anyone break in? Let's go and take a look. In an instant, the 9-heavens palace was in an uproar. Regardless of whether it was the people outside or inside, they all rushed towards the stairway, because the master of the stairway to heaven was the vice palace lord. Therefore, even if the white-haired old man agreed, the warning would not disappear. This is 9-heaven palace? So big! How magical! The beasts over there are so strong. When he reached the top of the stairway to heaven, Long Tianyu's heart couldn't help but tremble when he saw the majestic scene before him. The village chief was also dumbfounded, because this was also his first time entering the 9-heavens palace. He was deeply shocked by the scene before him. Lunatic, Jiang Haotian, a surprised voice was heard, following closely. A familiar figure broke through the air and landed on the square. It was Cheng-Li. The outer sanctum was the closest to the stairway to heaven, so as an outer sanctum elder, he was the first to rush over. Who are they? Cheng-Li asked with a frown when he saw the village chief and Long Tianyu. It has nothing to do with you. Scram to the side. Lunatic grabbed the village chief and flew into the air. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. He brought Long Tianyu and followed behind Madman, flying towards the inner sect. Looking at the attitude of the two, Cheng-Li's eyes flashed with a cold light as he angrily said, Lunatic, Jiang Haotian, you guys are too presumptuous. You actually dare to bring outsiders into the 9-heaven palace. If you speak any more nonsense, this daddy will kill you. Lunatic turned around and stared at Cheng-Li. Cheng-Li's pupils immediately shrank as a chill appeared in his heart. Qin Feiyang pointed below the stairway to heaven and smiled. Elder, this matter has already been approved by that old man. What? Cheng-Li was stunned. It's senior brother Lunatic and Jiang Haotian. Who are that man and child? Why were they brought to the 9-heaven palace? Wait, Did you guys notice that senior brother Lunatic's expression is very bad? Along the way, no one dared to block them. But looking at the back of Qin Feiyang and Lunatic, everyone was filled with suspicion. Intersect. The crimson gold divine tower was located at the peak of the mountain, giving off a majestic and ancient aura. Lunatic and Qin Feiyang brought the village chief and Long Tianyu to the square in front of the crimson gold divine tower. Qin Feiyang glanced at the village chief and smiled. This is where your son cultivates. He cultivates in such a place? One look and I can tell that this place is different. Looks like that kid didn't lie to me. He is someone with status in the Nine Heaven Palace. You guys are all dead. The village chief smiled proudly. Ignorance is scary. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Even now he was still so proud. He was so stupid that no medicine could save him. The village chief didn't notice and shouted, "Son, come out. Someone wants to kill your daddy." Behind them, there were already many people surrounding them. Hearing the village chief's words, everyone looked at the village chief in shock. Son, what was going on? At the same time, the first level of the crimson gold divine tower, a black-clothed youth sat on the ground with a face filled with shock. This seems to be Father's voice, but isn't he at home? Why would he appear in the Nine Heaven Palace? It should be an illusion. The black-clothed youth muttered and closed his eyes, not bothering about it. Ryuko, I am calling you. Do you hear me? Very soon. Another angry roar sounded. It's really Father? But what is going on? Why is Father in the Nine Heaven Palace? Wait. Was the warning from the stairway because of Father? No. Father said that someone wants to kill him. Father is asking for help. He got up and left the crimson gold divine tower with killing intent. He shouted, "Who is so bold to hurt my father?" Outside, Long Xiang's voice also came out of the crimson gold divine pagoda, echoing above the divine pagoda for a long time. Just you wait. Next year, today will be the anniversary of your death. When the village chief heard Ryuko's voice, he immediately looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman and sneered. The corner of Madman's mouth lifted slightly, full of ridicule. I understand. It's probably that Ryuko's father accidentally offended Madman, so Madman brought him into the Nine Heaven Palace to find trouble with Ryuko. Your guess shouldn't be too far from the truth. Is this person stupid? He actually dared to offend senior brother Madman. The most ridiculous thing is that he thought that his son Ryuko can support him. What an idiot! Who doesn't know senior brother Madman's means? Even a heaven-list disciple can't enter senior brother Madman's eyes, let alone a mere earth-list disciple. The disciples gathered at the back slowly guessed the general situation and whispered. Their faces were full of ridicule. Boom! The door of the crimson gold divine tower opened. A black-clothed youth strode out, his face full of anger. It was Ryuko. He glanced around and raised his head to look at the village chief. Seeing that Madman and Qin Feiyang were also there, he was slightly stunned. Immediately, he hurriedly flew up and cupped his hands. Thank you for bringing my father into the Nine Heaven Palace. Son, why are you thanking them? The village chief frowned. Of course, I have to thank them. They brought you into the Nine Heaven Palace. This is a great kindness. Ryuko said. He still didn't know about the grudge between the village chief and Qin Feiyang. He only thought that Qin Feiyang and Madman were kind enough to bring his father into the Nine Heaven Palace. After saying that, Ryuko ignored the stunned village chief and turned to look at Long Tianyu, who was standing beside Qin Feiyang. He smiled and said, Tianyu, you're here too. Long Tianyu giggled and said, Brother Xiang, long time no see. After all, they were from the same village, so they must be very familiar with each other. Ryuko looked at village chief and Long Tianyu and asked, Father, Tianyu, who wants to kill you? Hurry up and tell me. I'll take you to destroy him right away. Kill him? Madman said. Yes. How dare he bully the family of Ryuko Ryuyang. Even if he is the god of heaven, I will not let him off. Ryuko said coldly. Really? So you want to kill me? The madman smiled playfully as he looked at Ryuko. What? Ryuko was stunned. He quickly looked at the madman and smiled. How could I kill you? I'm talking about the person who wanted to kill my father. Village chief cried out. Son, they are the ones who want to kill me. Them. Ryuko was startled. He looked at village chief and asked, Father, who are they? In his opinion, his father would definitely not offend the madman and Qin Feiyong. Village chief pointed at the madman and Qin Feiyong and said, The two of them. What? Ryuko was petrified. The people his father was talking about were the madman and Jiang Haotian? What was going on? The village was so far away from Nine Heaven Palace. How did his father offend these two? The madman crossed his arms in front of his chest, his eyes filled with playfulness. Ryuko came back to his senses and looked at Qin Feiyong and Jiang Haotian. He asked, Senior brother madman, Junior brother Jiang, is this true? Qin Feiyong smiled. Your father said it himself. How could it be false? Long Xiang felt as if he had been struck by a bolt from the blue. His body stiffened, and his face instantly turned deathly pale. It was actually true. It was these two people who wanted to kill his father, not to mention Jiang Haotian. This madman was a lawless person. How could his father offend him? Son, what are you doing? Teach them a lesson. They almost killed me, village chief said angrily. Shut up. Ryuko suddenly raised his head and stared at village chief. Village chief's expression suddenly froze. Then he turned to Ryuko and scolded him. What kind of attitude is this? I worked so hard to raise you. Now that you have grown up and your wings have hardened, you treat me like this? Interesting. The playfulness on the madman's face became stronger. Qin Feiyong also had a smile on his face. Looking at the smiles on Qin Feiyong and Jiang Haotian's faces, Ryuko was burning with anxiety. He shouted at village chief, Shut up, shut up. If you continue like this, you will get me killed. What a joke. You are now an Earth Roll disciple. Who dares to touch you? I think you have hardened your wings. You don't even listen to me. Village chief said angrily. Chapter 21:13. Is this person from the countryside? Does he think that an Earth Roll disciple is invincible? Even a Heaven Roll disciple doesn't dare to be arrogant in front of Senior Brother Madman. What is an Earth Roll disciple? Just watch. Ryuko Yang will definitely be killed by him. Everyone looked at the village chief with disdain in their eyes. Ryuko Yang saw that the village chief not only didn't restrain himself, but instead became even more aggressive, making him anxious. Pa! He raised his hand and slapped the village chief's face. The village chief was stunned on the spot. Ryuko Yang wasn't in the mood to mess around with the village chief, as long as he could shut the village chief up. Immediately after, he knelt down in the air and looked at Madman. Senior brother, this must be a misunderstanding. Please be magnanimous and don't bother with us, okay? The village chief was a vain person to begin with. After being slapped by his son in public, how could he hold back his face? When he came back to his senses, he wanted to get angry, but Ryuko Yang suddenly knelt down, making him dumbfounded. What was going on? His son was an Earth Roll disciple, but he actually knelt down in front of this person? Misunderstanding? I don't think this is a misunderstanding. This old man of yours is more than a little arrogant. Not only has he been rude to me, but he even said that this day next year will be my death anniversary. Madman chuckled. What? He actually said such words. Ryuko Yang's eyes trembled as he looked at the village chief and shouted, Quickly kneel down and kowtow to Senior Brother Madman and apologize. Kowtow and apologize? The village chief began to panic. He also slowly realized that the two young people in front of him weren't that simple. Hurry up, Ryuko Yang said angrily. The father of an Earth-Roll disciple kowtowing to me. I'm afraid I can't accept it. After all, an Earth-Roll disciple has status and place in our Nine-Heaven Palace. Madman said. No, no, no. My father only bragged because he didn't know. In front of you, Senior Brother, what am I? I'm not even a dog. Ryuko smiled flatteringly. Looking at the lowly Ryuko kneeling in front of the madman, the village chief panicked. If even an Earth-ranking disciple was so terrified, one could imagine how high the position of this madman in Nine Heavens Palace was. It seemed that this time he had really gotten himself into big trouble. Ryuko roared, "Kneel!" Village chief trembled and immediately knelt down in front of Madman. His face was filled with fear as he thought to himself, "Son, where did this person come from? He is someone we can never afford to offend. There are over 10 million disciples in the Nine Heavens Palace, and he is the #1 disciple. No one has ever dared to be arrogant in front of him. If he wants to kill us, even heavenly deities won't be able to stop him. Dad, you're in big trouble this time." "How did you offend him? Can't you be more careful?" Ryuko was furious. When the village chief heard this, he immediately collapsed to the ground. Who would have thought that this seemingly unremarkable young man would be so terrifying? Not so arrogant anymore. Where's the arrogance from before? Madman said, I'm sorry. Village chief's expression changed as he hurriedly kowtowed and apologized. Just a word of sorry, and it's over. Then where will I put my face in the future? You're really tired of being arrogant in front of me. If you're not arrogant, then I'll be arrogant. Now, I'll let you see what true arrogance is. Madman kicked the village chief's face, causing his face to be mangled. He lay in the air and howled miserably. Following that, Madman slapped Ryuko's face again. Long Xiang's face was also lacerated, flesh and blood flying everywhere. Did you see that? Slapping an Earth-ranking disciple in public. This is true arrogance. Who do you think you are? Madman laughed angrily. Senior brother, spare me. How could Ryuko care about the injuries on his face? He kept kowtowing and begging for mercy. As for the village chief, it was too late for regrets. How did he provoke such a terrifying fiend? Madman spat on the ground with a face full of disdain. He looked at Ryuko and said, Ryuko, I'll ask you one thing. Do you know what your father did in the village? Ryuko was slightly taken aback as he raised his head and looked at Madman in surprise. Answer me, Madman shouted. Ryuko trembled as he turned to look at the village chief. He shook his head and said, I don't know. You don't know? Then why are you hesitating? Jian Haotian read his memories. I want to see if he's telling the truth. Madman said. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. He formed a seal with both hands, and a puppet imprint appeared. Madman said, If you dare to resist, I'll kill you now. Ryuko originally wanted to resist. Although he didn't know what the imprint was, from Madman's words, it wasn't hard to guess that it should be a secret technique that could read the memories of others. Reading his memories, how could he let that happen? However, when he heard Madman's warning, he didn't dare to resist. He lowered his head and said bitterly, There's no need to read my memories. I admit that I know everything. I knew you were lying. Since you knew, why didn't you stop it? Just because you're a small disciple of Nine Heaven Palace. You and your father can do whatever you want in the village? Madman roared. It's my fault. In the past, I tried to persuade him, but he didn't listen. What could I do? He's my father after all. Ryuko shouted. Persuaded? Why don't I believe you? Madman sneered and looked at Qin Feiyong. Control him. I want to know the truth. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the imprint turned into a stream of light and entered Ryuko's head. After controlling Ryuko, he immediately read Ryuko's memories. Long Xiang immediately held miserably. A moment later, Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He looked at Madman and said, "Senior brother, you're really good at predicting things." When Ryuko heard this, he became nervous. "What do you mean?" Madman was suspicious. Not only did he not stop his father, but he also often bullied people in the village. There are more than a dozen girls in the village who are all harmed by him, and his methods of torturing others are better than his father. Qin Feiyong said. Ryuko was in despair. He could actually read his memories. What? There are more than a dozen girls who are all ruined by him. Madman was dumbfounded, unable to believe it to the extreme. Qin Feiyong nodded and said, "And after he ruined them, they were all killed by him. Bastard, you are simply the scum of scum, and the shame of our 9 Heavens Palace. For a person like you, even if you were to be cut into pieces, it would not be enough to relieve the hatred in my heart." Madman flew into a rage and slammed his palm towards Long Xiang's head. "Don't kill me, senior brother, I was wrong. I will definitely change in the future," Ryuko roared in horror. However, Madman turned a deaf ear and didn't show any mercy. He slapped the top of Long Xiang's head. Suddenly, a scream resounded through the sky. Along with the scream, Ryuko's head exploded on the spot like a watermelon, and blood dyed the surroundings red. Son, the village chief stared dumbfoundedly at the corpse that was slowly falling down, his entire body sinking into deep fear. Madman smiled in disdain, looked at the village chief, and said, "Didn't you always say that when you see your son, it will be the time of our death? What about now?" The village chief quivered and hurriedly begged, "Lord, please spare my life. I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I'm sorry. Actually, I admire your courage, because you are the first person who dares to be arrogant in front of me. Unfortunately, you are also very stupid. Because of your stupidity, not only did you kill yourself, you also killed your son." Madman grabbed the village chief and flew towards a mountain not far away. "Madman, what is he trying to do? It's definitely not a good thing." Ryuko Yang was indeed killed. How pitiful. Pitiful. Didn't you hear Jiang Haoyan say before that this father and son pair bullied men and women in the village? There were more than 10 girls in the village who were all ruined by Ryuko Yang. This kind of scum deserves to die. I'm just curious, how did Madman and Jiang Haoyan find out about this? I also know that Ryuko Yang, we even drank together a few times. His village is far from our 9 Heaven Palace. It seems that we have to open more than 10 altars to get there. Maybe someone snitched on him. It's also possible that they accidentally bumped into him. People discussed in low voices. Madman said. He grabbed the village chief and landed in the sky above the mountain range. Fierce beasts were everywhere in the mountain range, and each of them had terrifying strength, with the weakest being a monarch god. However, these fierce beasts would not harm the disciples of 9 Heaven Palace. Madman glanced at the mountain range, smiled coldly, and crippled the village chief's cultivation. Then he let go of the village chief, and the village chief fell down powerlessly. Madman shouted, "Tear him apart for me!" Madman's words caused the originally docile fierce beasts to become ferocious. They bared their fangs and pounced at the village chief. Damn, he wants those fierce beasts to tear him apart bit by bit. Madman, this fellow is too cruel. Seeing this scene, the faces of all the disciples present turned pale. At the same time, hearing Madman's words, the village chief's body and mind trembled. "No, I beg you, let me go. Who can be merciful and save me? He struggled with all his might, shouting with all his might, but no one paid any attention to him. What a joke! This was someone that Madman wanted to kill. Who would dare to save him? Ah, without any suspense, the outcome was already decided. Those fierce beasts pounced forward as if they were fighting over a delicious cake. Miserable screams resounded through the sky. Qin Feiyang also looked at the scene indifferently, but suddenly a childish voice sounded from the side. Why is this happening? Qin Feiyang was stunned and lowered his head to look at Long Tianyu. He saw Long Tianyu looking at the dismembered village chief. His small face couldn't help but turn pale. He also had a trace of puzzlement. Long Tianyu gathered his courage and looked at Qin Feiyang. Big brother, Grandpa Village Chief is such a good person. Why do you want to kill him? The human heart is sinister. Some people are not as simple as they seem. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand. When you grow up in the future, you will naturally understand. Qin Feiyang smiled. However, Long Tianyu's performance made him look at him in a different light. An ordinary 12 or 13-year-old youth would definitely be scared to tears when they saw such a bloody scene. Although Long Tianyu looked a little scared, at least he wasn't scared out of his wits. This meant that he had experienced a lot in the past, and his temperament had been tempered, surpassing his peers. Chapter 2114. The village chief and Ryuko had died one after another, and their fates were so miserable. But in the madman's heart, there was still resentment that he couldn't find a way to vent. Because when he thought of those girls who were humiliated by Ryuko and then killed by him, he couldn't calm down. What are you thinking about? Qin Feiyang pulled Long Tianyu forward and asked suspiciously, Why do you think there is such a scum in this world? It's not an exaggeration to say that he's worse than pigs and dogs. The madman said, This kind of thing is very common. It's just that you stay in Nine Heaven Palace all year round and don't know. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. It could be seen that the madman didn't know much about the cruelty of the outside world, but he was already used to it. Very common. The madman frowned. Qin Feiyang nodded his head. No. This resentment is stuck in my heart. If I don't vent it out, I will definitely go crazy. The madman shook his head and turned to fly towards the sky stairway. Where are you going? Qin Feiyang hurriedly asked. To get rid of evil for the people, punish evil, and promote good. The madman said without turning his head. Qin Feiyang looked at the madman's back in shock. He didn't expect that this devil incarnate actually had a kind heart. Very soon, the madman disappeared without a trace. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He left just like that. What a willful fellow. Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly shouted and chased after him with Long Tianyu. What? The madman stopped in the air and waited for Qin Feiyang. When Qin Feiyang caught up, he asked suspiciously. Qin Feiyang looked at Long Tianyu and said, Bring this little fellow with you. Bring him? The madman's expression stiffened and then said, What kind of joke is this? I don't want to bring a burden. I'm not a burden. Long Tianyu looked at madman with dissatisfaction. With your little bit of cultivation, I can kill you with a single breath. Aren't you just a burden? Young man, can you have some self-awareness? Madman's face was full of disdain. Long Tianyu glared at the madman. His face was filled with displeasure, but he wasn't afraid at all. You still dare to glare at me? Madman raised his eyebrows. Humph. You are very strong now, but I will definitely surpass you in the future. Long Tianyu snorted coldly. Ouch! Madman exclaimed and then rubbed his chin. He sized up Long Tianyu and laughed. You have guts. Okay, since you said that, I will bring you along. A smile appeared on Qin Feiyang's face. He lowered his head and looked at Long Tianyu. Although he has a bad temper, he's really strong. If you learn from him, it will be of great help to your future growth. All right. Long Tianyu nodded and flew to Madman's side. Madman's face was cold. Kid, if you follow me, you have to listen to me no matter what. Do you understand? If it makes sense, I will listen. Long Tianyu said. Damn, you have a personality. Madman chuckled, grabbed Long Tianyu, and tore through the air without looking back. Qin Feiyong watched the two of them leave. Qin Feiyong, why did you let Tianyu follow him? With that guy's personality, he will teach Tianyu to be a little madman sooner or later. The voice of the artifact spirit suddenly rang in Qin Feiyong's mind. Qin Feiyong laughed inwardly. A big madman and a little madman. Not bad. I'm not joking. Tianyu is like my grandson in my eyes. I don't want him to be like that madman and be crazy all day long. The artifact spirit said. I'm not joking either. Don't look down on Madman. Although he is a little abnormal, his heart is very meticulous. If Madman is really going to punish evil and promote good, then Long Tianyu will be able to learn a lot by following him. For example, the ugliness of human nature, darkness, and scheming. The most important thing is that in the process of Madman punishing evil and promoting good, he will be able to learn what is good and what is justice. This will be very helpful for his growth in the future. Qin Feiyong thought. So it's like that. The artifact spirit was enlightened and smiled happily. I didn't misjudge you. You are a talent and a good teacher. Teacher? Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned and shook his head. I didn't say that I will take Long Tianyu as my disciple. Moreover, in front of you, I don't have the qualifications. Although this exalted is stronger than you in terms of teaching, I'm truly ashamed of my inferiority. Why don't you spend some effort and help me teach him a lesson? The artifact spirit said with a pleading tone. Try your best. There is a good saying, the master can show you the way, but the cultivation depends on the person. What path to take in the end will depend on his own choice. Qin Feiyong said. That's true. The artifact spirit said. This ninth heaven palace is not a good place. Qin Feiyong was surprised and asked, What do you mean? I control the power of death, so I am very sensitive to evil things. The moment I entered the ninth heaven palace, I felt a terrifying evil aura in the deepest part of the ninth heaven palace. The artifact spirit said. Evil aura, the deepest part of the ninth heaven palace. Qin Feiyong turned his head and looked at the depths of the ninth heaven palace, his eyes flickering. What kind of evil thing could it be that even the Grey Castle was so concerned about it? Jiang Haoyan. Suddenly, a hearty laughter rang out, interrupting Qin Feiyong's thoughts. Qin Feiyong looked over and saw a purple-clothed youth, stepping into the air step by step. It was Mu Tianyang. A smile also appeared on Qin Feiyong's face. Mu Tianyang said, Let's go to the cave for a chat. Sure. Qin Feiyong nodded. The two of them walked together and entered the first sacred peak. Inside the first cave, the two sat opposite each other. Mu Tianyang asked, That village chief, is it the mission that Shangguan Fenglan gave you? You can say so. Qin Feiyong nodded. You're just fooling me. How could the dignified law enforcement hall master let you handle such a small matter? Mu Tianyang rolled his eyes. I really can't fool you. Qin Feiyong shook his head and laughed. Mu Tianyang's eyes revealed a trace of disdain and said, Is it related to that young man? Qin Feiyong nodded, looked at the tightly closed stone door and said, This matter is complicated. Let's go to the Black Tortoise world and talk about it slowly. Mu Tianyang's eyes flashed. To be so cautious. It seemed that it was not a small matter. Black Tortoise world. Medicine field courtyard. Qin Feiyong did not hide anything from Mu Tianyang about what he had experienced in the past 2 days. What? He actually obtained another heaven-defying divine artifact? Mu Tianyang was dumbstruck when he heard this. The gray castle appeared and said unhappily, "I didn't get it. I was just temporarily helping him." Mu Tianyang looked at the gray castle with a trace of doubt in his eyes. What? The artifact spirit was suspicious. "I'm a little puzzled. You are a demonic creature. Why are you so good to a human child? Don't blame me for being suspicious. You followed Qin Feiyang. Are you up to something?" Mu Tianyang said. Up to something. Qin Feiyang also looked at the gray castle without batting an eyelid. In fact, he also thought so. But there was no evidence and he couldn't make an assertion. Up to something. With my strength, if I really have some up to something, do I need to hide like this? The artifact spirit was disdainful. That's not necessarily true. After all, it's not the first time I've come into contact with a heaven-defying divine artifact like you. Existences like you, without a purpose, how can you help us humans? Mu Tianyang said. The artifact spirit sneered. Don't measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Good, good, good. I'm a villain. Let's not talk about this for the time being. What I want to know the most is, are Qin Batian and Lu Jinyang really in the Sky Dragon Sea? Mu Tianyang said. If they were really there before, I can swear, but now it's hard to say. I have to go and find them to know. The artifact spirit said. Sky Dragon Sea? Mu Tianyang pondered for a while, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, since we have a clue now, we should go to the Sky Dragon Sea as soon as possible. I think so too. But now we are working in the resource hall. Without a suitable excuse, we can't leave. Qin Feiyang frowned. This is a small matter. I'll solve it. And I have a good news here. Mu Tianyang smiled. What good news? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked. Mu Tianyang smiled, took out the image crystal, and with a wave of his hand, a picture slowly unfolded in the void above. Qin Feiyang looked up curiously, and a flash of light flashed in his eyes. It was actually an image. In the video, Feng Yuan sat in the lounge on the second floor of the resource hall, and his face was extremely gloomy. Opposite, Mu Tianyang stood respectfully with his head lowered, and there was a trace of nervousness on his face. Didn't I ask you to cooperate with them to kill Jiang Haoqian and Hui Yi? Now tell me, what did you do at that time? Feng Yuan said angrily. Mu Tianyang's face changed, and he hurriedly said, Oh, master, you can't blame me for this. If I don't blame you, then blame me? In that situation, as long as you took action, Jiang Haoqian and Hui Yi would definitely die. Feng Yuan shouted. Oh, master, although Jiang Haoqian and Hui Yi would definitely die if I took action, wouldn't I become an accomplice? If there was no one at that time, it would be different. But at that time, there were thousands of people outside the North City Gate, and they were all watching. And Madman just happened to rush over. You know Madman's character. If he saw me helping those assassins to kill Jiang Haoqian and Hui Yi, then my little life would definitely be gone. Mu Tianyang's face was full of grievances. Bastard. Compared to Jiang Haoqian and Hui Yi's lives, what is your life? Feng Yuan was furious. Mu Tianyang's face suddenly sank, and he said, Oh, master, what do you mean by this? In your eyes, I'm just a chess piece? Then what do you think you are? A cooperative relationship. You think you're worthy? You should know that right now, your little life is already in my hands. If I want to kill you, it's as simple as stepping on an ant. Feng Yuan sneered. Mu Tianyang said angrily, When I followed you, you didn't say that. Yes, at that time this old man was very polite to you, but that was only at that time. And now, do you have the qualifications to negotiate with this old man? Feng Yuan sneered. Chapter 2115. Mu Tianyang was furious. You're burning the bridge after crossing the river. I really regret letting you control me back then. No wonder Guillaume betrayed you. A sinister villain like you is not worthy of our service. Slap. After Mu Tianyang finished speaking, Feng Yuan stood up angrily and slapped Mu Tianyang's face. A blood-red palm print appeared. The corner of Mu Tianyang's mouth also flowed with blood. Feng Yuan laughed. Do you believe that this old man will kill you right now? Of course, but if you kill me, you'll never get rid of Jiang Haoyan. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but you don't have the ability. Mu Tianyang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and sneered. Feng Yuan flew into a rage out of humiliation and raised his arm again, but it stopped in the air and did not slap down. Mu Tianyang did not show the slightest fear and even looked at him provocatively. Ha ha! Feng Yuan suddenly laughed and lowered his arm. He returned to his seat and said, You do have some value. It's a pity to kill you. It's good that you know, Mu Tianyang said. Feng Yuan said, Then tell me, how can we get rid of Jiang Haoyan? I've already said that this matter can't be rushed. To deal with Jiang Haoyan, we have to do it step by step. Mu Tianyang said, All right, this old man won't make a move for now. Find an opportunity. This old man still has things to do. You can leave now. Feng Yuan waved his hand. Mu Tianyang's eyes flashed. I have another question. What question? Feng Yuan looked at him in confusion. Mu Tianyang said, Who assassinated Ma Guang and those assassins? Does this have anything to do with you? Feng Yuan frowned. Of course it does. This person can kill Ma Guang and the others under the eyes of lunatic without anyone noticing. One can imagine that he must be very strong. If I can get him to help me, it will definitely be twice the result with half the effort. Mu Tianyang said confidently. Feng Yuan was stunned and asked, You mean you want him to follow you? Listen to your orders? Yes. Mu Tianyang nodded. Haha, you're getting more and more arrogant. You actually want to order this old man around? Feng Yuan was rocking back and forth with laughter. He looked at Mu Tianyang as if he was looking at a clown. What? Are you the one who killed Ma Guang and the others? Mu Tianyang was bewildered. That's right. It's me. Who asked Ma Guang to be so talkative? Aren't you courting death? Feng Yuan sneered. You actually took action personally? Mu Tianyang was shocked. You may leave. If you want this old man to continue nurturing you, then show me your true strength and methods. Feng Yuan said coldly. Mu Tianyang took a deep look at Feng Yuan, then turned and left the lounge. The video ended there. You actually got something out of him. Impressive. Qin Feiyang gave Mu Tianyang a thumbs up. It's nothing. But that slap really hurt. Mu Tianyang touched his face, a trace of murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Qin Feiyang said, Sooner or later, I'll make him pay for it. And it will be 100 times more. Mu Tianyang smiled coldly, put away the video crystal, and said, As Lunatic said, this evidence is not enough. I know. There's no hurry. Take your time. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Mu Tianyang nodded and took out another interspatial ring. What is it? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Mu Tianyang said soul stones. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang quickly grabbed the interspatial ring and checked it. Sure enough, it was full of soul stones. Mu Tianyang said, A total of 350 million. 350 million? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Although the first 4 symbols, Infinite Divine Pill, was sold for a sky-high price of 1 billion, that was because Lunatic and Feng Zihan were fighting. When the second pill was auctioned, Hui and I also played with Yu Zijia. But Yu Zijia seemed to have received news that we were bidding on behalf of Feng Yuan, so he tactfully withdrew. The second pill was only sold for 400 million. As for the third pill, Hui and I didn't bid. Feng Zihan also didn't bid. Only Yu Zijie competed with others. In the end, Yu Zijie got it for 200 million. Mu Tianyang said. Only 200 million? Qin Feiyang frowned. 200 million is already a lot, okay? After all, it only takes 100 million soul stones to cultivate from a perfect war god to a half-step monarch god. In other words, the price of the 4 symbols infinite divine pill has doubled. Besides, in the northern region, how many people have the ability to take out hundreds of millions of soul stones at once? Mu Tianyang said. That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded. 1 billion, 400 million, 200 million. In total, the 3 4 symbols infinite divine pills that were auctioned yesterday were worth a total of 6 billion soul stones. We'll get 800 million. Then, after deducting Huo Yi's hush money, we only have 700 million left. So, the 2 of us can only get 350 million each. Mu Tianyang said. You really gave him hush money? Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel his heart ache. Huo Yi's hush money was 50 million per person. In other words, he didn't do anything and took away 100 million soul stones from him and Mu Tianyang. What if he doesn't give it to us? If it really leaks out that the 4 symbols infinite divine pill was refined by us, then there will be a lot of trouble. It's better to spend some money to shut his mouth. Mu Tianyang was helpless. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but smile bitterly. Mu Tianyang continued. But this person is also tactful. I guarantee that in the future he won't come and extort us again. If a person is not satisfied, then it will bring about a fatal disaster. He is a smart person, so he will definitely think of this. Qin Feiyang said. Mu Tianyang asked. Then I'll go and plan, and then set off for the Sky Dragon Sea? All right. Qin Feiyang nodded, and then brought Mu Tianyang and the Grey Castle out of the Black Tortoise realm, appearing in the cave. Mu Tianyang did not delay, and immediately turned to leave. The artifact spirit looked at Mu Tianyang's back and transmitted, This person is not simple. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked curiously, What do you mean? The artifact spirit said, I can sense a dangerous aura on him. You're quite observant. This person is indeed not simple because he also has a heaven-defying divine artifact. Qin Feiyang said, What? The artifact spirit was shocked. When did heaven-defying divine artifacts become so worthless? Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of something and asked, By the way, I have something to ask you. Is Frenzy's spatial divine artifact also a heaven-defying divine artifact? Yes. The artifact spirit replied. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He was just guessing, but he didn't expect it to be true. And according to my guess, that spatial divine artifact should also have a time array. And it's not a low-level time array. The artifact spirit said. No wonder he wanted to hide it from me, afraid that I would go in. It turns out that there is a time array. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. Wait, low-level? There is a difference between low-level and high-level time arrays? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Of course there is. The artifact spirit said. How? Qin Feiyang was immediately interested. High-level, low-level. Low-level time arrays can change the rules of time at most 10 years. 10 to 1,000 years belongs to the mid-level time array, and more than 1,000 years belongs to the high-level time array. The artifact spirit explained. What? 1 day is equal to 1,000 years. Qin Feiyang was shocked. You can never imagine the things in this world. 1,000 years is nothing. It is said that some time arrays can change the rules of time up to 10,000 years. The artifact spirit said. Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. 1 day is equal to 10,000 years. This is too terrifying. He didn't even dare to think about it. Qin Feiyang asked, Then how can one set up a time array? The artifact spirit said, An existence that has mastered the law of time can set up a time array. Master the law of time? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. Suddenly he thought of Mu Tianyang's blood blade and asked, "That time reversal, is it considered the law of time?" "Of course," the artifact spirit replied. "In that case, can't the blood blade also set up a time array? In that case, why did Mu Tianyang go to the crimson gold divine tower?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Of course, things like divine artifacts can't set up a time array. For example, this lord doesn't have this ability." The artifact spirit said. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, "Why?" "Because the power of law contained in divine artifacts is bestowed by the person who forged them. In other words, artifact spirits like us don't fully comprehend the power of law. Without fully comprehending the power of law, naturally we can't set up a time array." The artifact spirit explained patiently. "So that's the case." Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. Then this could be explained. Although the blood blade could use the law of time, it hadn't fully comprehended it, so it couldn't set up a time array. In that case, Mu Tianyang could only think of another way. Previously, he thought that Mu Tianyang might be up to something again, but in the end, it was just him being paranoid. Being too paranoid was not a good thing. Suddenly, the artifact spirit was surprised and sent a sound transmission. "Someone is coming. This lord will avoid it first." With that, the gray castle rushed into Qin Feiyang's qi like lightning. Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at the stone door. Sure enough, in less than 3 breaths, the stone door was pushed open, and a woman in light purple slowly walked into the cave. Qin Feiyang hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. "Disciple Jiang Haojin greets, Lord Palace Master." "That's right. The person who came was Shangguan Fenglan." Shangguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyang and said angrily, "This lunatic is really too reckless. He actually brought you to the far west. Fortunately, it's not a big deal." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Senior brother lunatic also wanted to bring me to see the world." "Then did you see anything?" Shangguan Fenglan asked. Qin Feiyang said, "We have investigated the cause of death of those law enforcers. They died at the hands of the frost apes in the far west." Shangguan Fenglan said, "You should know that this lord is not asking about this." "Then what is it?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Long Tianyu has already been brought to the 9 Heavens Palace by you, don't you know? Don't play dumb in front of this lord." "This lord wants to know the reason for Long Tianyu's talent transformation," Shangguan Fenglan said. "Lord is asking about this." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood, then lowered his head and said, "To be honest, Lord, we have not investigated this matter clearly." Chapter 21:16. "I didn't find out," Shangguan Fenglan murmured. She slowly walked into the living room and sat on a chair. She looked up at Qin Feiyang with an extremely unfriendly expression and said, "Do you take me for a fool?" "I wouldn't dare." Qin Feiyang hurriedly bowed. "I think you don't take me seriously." Shangguan Fenglan slammed her palm on the armrest of the chair. Her face was full of anger as she shouted, "You can even read Ryuko Yang's memories. I don't believe that you can't read Long Tianyu's memories." Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. He didn't expect that Ryuko Yang's matter would spread to Shangguan Fenglan's ears so quickly. Although at that time, when he controlled Ryuko Yang, he did mention the name of the puppet technique, everyone was not stupid. They would definitely think that it was a kind of secret technique. Shangguan Fenglan smiled coldly and said meaningfully, "I also didn't expect that you actually have such a secret technique." Qin Feiyang was a little flustered. Shangguan Fenglan shouted, "I want to hear the truth." Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, and said, "Okay, I'll tell you. I did read Long Tianyu's memories, and also know that the reason for his talent transformation is because of a divine artifact." Divine artifact? Shangguan Fenglan was surprised. This answer was a little unexpected. Yes, in the deepest part of the land of the far west, there is a divine artifact. When Frenzy and I rushed there, we also saw the divine artifact. But that divine artifact was too terrifying. We were no match for it at all and could only flee in panic. Qin Feiyang said, "What kind of divine artifact?" Shangguan Fenglan asked curiously. "It's a gray, ancient castle. It controls the power of death and can seize vitality and erode the divine soul." Qin Feiyang said, "Seize vitality, erode the divine soul," Shangguan Fenglan murmured. Suddenly, as if thinking of something, her body trembled slightly and she asked, "Are you sure it's the power of death?" "Yes," Qin Feiyang nodded. "How could it be?" Shangguan Fenglan suddenly stood up, looked at Qin Feiyang and said in a deep voice, "This matter only you and Frenzy know. Don't tell anyone else, understand?" "Yes," Qin Feiyang replied. However, he was a little puzzled. Did Shangguan Fenglan know the origin of Grey Castle? And Shangguan Fenglan originally wanted to leave, but she suddenly stopped. She turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, "When Madman returns, have him bring Long Tanyu to see me? Forget it. I'll personally send a message. SSS without 8TT what?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "TSS as funds." A blurry gray figure appeared. It was the spirit of the Grey Castle. The spirit looked at Qin Feiyang and said anxiously, "Qin Feiyang, don't let her see Tianyu." "Why? You really know her?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "I do know her. And we have a grudge. If Tianyu falls into her hands, he won't have a good time," the spirit said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Then why didn't you tell me just now?" If the spirit had told him earlier that he had a grudge with Shangguan Fenglan, he wouldn't have told the truth. For example, he could have fabricated a divine weapon and then told Frenzy, and Shangguan Fenglan wouldn't be able to find out. "It's been too long. I didn't think of it just now. When I heard her last words, I realized something was wrong, so I thought about it carefully and remembered the grudge with her." The spirit sighed. Qin Feiyang said suspiciously, "Then what's the grudge between you two? Why are you so flustered?" "This grudge isn't ordinary. Let's put it this way. You two can be considered life and death enemies." The spirit said, "Life and death enemies? How could you forget such a serious matter? I really admire you." Qin Feiyang was speechless to the extreme. "We'll talk about this later. Quickly think of a way to inform Frenzy to hide Tianyu," the spirit urged. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, "I didn't establish a contract with Frenzy." "Then what should we do?" "Tianyu can't enter Ninth Heaven Palace again," the spirit said. "Don't worry. This matter hasn't reached the point where it can't be resolved." Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered. Although the spirit was anxious, it didn't disturb Qin Feiyang. A moment later, Qin Feiyang finally raised his head and looked at the spirit with a smile. "Let Long Tianyu come back." "Are you kidding me?" the spirit said angrily. "Don't be anxious. Let me finish. Although your relationship with Long Tianyu isn't shallow, only Frenzy and I know about this matter. Shangguan Fenglan doesn't know anything. The people in the village also don't know anything. So, as long as Frenzy and I don't say anything, no matter how Shangguan Fenglan investigates, she won't know the true relationship between you and Long Tianyu." Qin Feiyang smiled. The spirit pondered for a moment and asked, and then, "When Long Tianyu comes back, Shangguan Fenglan will interrogate him. At that time, we'll secretly tell Long Tianyu that you've only met him once and don't know why you're helping him. He's still a child. Shangguan Fenglan won't think that he would lie. This way, Shangguan Fenglan won't be able to do anything to him. At most, she'll send someone to secretly monitor him. And as I expected, Shangguan Fenglan will definitely make an exception and let Long Tianyu stay in Ninth Heaven Palace. Because it's easier to monitor him in Ninth Heaven Palace. Qin Feiyang smiled. Not only can we resolve the crisis, but we can also stay in Ninth Heaven Palace. Hearing you say that, it's not a bad idea. Okay, I'll listen to you. The spirit pondered for a moment and nodded. Thank you for your trust in me. You go and recuperate first. I'll go to the stairway to heaven now and wait for Frenzy and Long Tianyu. Qin Feiyang said. The spirit disappeared in an instant. Qin Feiyang also turned and flew out of the cave, heading towards the stairway to heaven. It was evening when they came out of the far west land. Qin Feiyang and Frenzy stayed in the village for a while before returning to Ninth Heaven Palace. In other words, it was still night time. The sky of Ninth Heaven Palace was different from the far west land. The full moon was in the sky, and the stars were shining brightly. Just as Qin Feiyang left the cave, another figure flew out from cave number 4. It was Hui. Why are you still running out in the middle of the night? It shouldn't be anything good. Let's follow and see. Hui looked at Qin Feiyang's back suspiciously. He muttered a few words and silently entered the mountains below, following behind Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang, someone is following you. In the sky. Qin Feiyang didn't notice Hui following him. However, the tool spirit immediately discovered it and secretly informed Qin Feiyang. What? Someone is following me? Qin Feiyang was shocked. Don't look back. He's hiding in the mountains below. But this person's cultivation seems a bit weak. He's a perfect war god. The spirit said. Perfect war god? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Sneaky, and he's a perfect war god? A figure immediately appeared in Qin Feiyang's mind. He thought, where did he come from? The artifact spirit said, it's the 4th abode next to yours. It's really him. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but have a headache. You know him? The spirit asked. His name is Hui. We entered Empyrean Palace together. Our relationship, it's okay. Qin Feiyang thought. But you still have to be careful. Although this person's cultivation is weak, he gives me a great sense of crisis. This sense of crisis is not inferior to Mu Tianyang's heaven-defying divine artifact. The spirit said solemnly. What? Qin Feiyang was secretly shocked. He knew that Hui wasn't simple, but he didn't expect him to hide so deeply. The spirit said, I'm a bit puzzled now. Puzzled about what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. I'm puzzled. Why is it that the people you know are all mysterious and unfathomable? The spirit was confused. Frenzy, Mu Tianyang, Hui. Each one was more mysterious than the other. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly when he heard this. Actually, I'm also quite puzzled. By the way, do you have a grudge with Shangguan Fenglan? A mere Shangguan Fenglan is nothing. The spirit immediately smiled disdainfully. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was curious. It's a secret for the time being. The spirit said. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Wasn't this deliberately whetting his appetite? But since the spirit didn't want to say, he couldn't force it. After all, it was a heaven-defying demonic being and had a temper. Angering such an existence wouldn't do him any good. Not long after, Qin Feiyang rushed to the top of the sky stairway and looked down. He didn't go down and just waited at the top. Time passed quietly. Junior brother Jiang, why are you standing here? During this period, many disciples came back from the outside and saw Qin Feiyang standing here alone. They couldn't help but ask, looking at the scenery. This was Qin Feiyang's answer. No matter who asked, this was the answer. Those disciples were a little speechless. What scenery was there to look at? But now, Qin Feiyang was also a famous figure in Empyrean Palace, and he even had Madman's protection, so no one dared to ask more. They greeted him, showed a little friendliness, and then left. Unknowingly, it was midnight. What's going on? It's been so long. Why hasn't he come back? Qin Feiyang gradually furrowed his brows. The spirit said worriedly, "Could he have encountered some danger?" "It's not dangerous. After all, this is Empyrean Palace. Who doesn't know the name of Madman? Touching him is tantamount to courting death." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Suddenly, he patted his head and smiled bitterly. "I should have thought of it." "Thought of what?" The spirit said, "With Madman's character, how could he come back just because we asked him to? He's not such an obedient person. And he's not stupid. Shangguan Fenglan is in such a hurry to find him. She will definitely be suspicious. Don't worry about it for now. Go back and cultivate." Qin Feiyang shook his head, turned around, and flew away. After returning to his cave residence, he directly entered the ancient castle to cultivate in seclusion. "What's going on?" Hua Yi, who followed all the way, stood at the entrance of Qin Feiyang's cave residence with a dumbfounded face. He ran to the sky stairway, did nothing, and ran back. Was he bored? Chapter 21:17. The next day, early morning. As usual, Qin Feiyang entered the resource hall early in the morning to work. "Junior brother Jiang, what have you been doing these 2 days? Did you ask for leave from the hall master?" The one who spoke was a woman in white, called Wang Yin. She was about 1.8 meters tall, had a tall figure, and looked pretty good. When Qin Feiyang and the other two first entered the resource hall, it was this woman who was responsible for leading them, and she was the only woman in the resource hall. Moreover, Wang Yin's usual attitude towards people was also very good, so she was very popular with everyone. "Leave." Qin Feiyang was organizing the accounts. Hearing Wang Yin's words, he couldn't help but raise his head and look at Wang Yin suspiciously. "Don't you know? No matter where we go, the people of the resource hall have to ask for leave from the hall master in advance." Wang Yun said. "This," Qin Feiyang was startled and shook his head. "I really don't know." Wang Yun was startled and sighed. "It's my fault. I didn't tell you in advance." Qin Feiyang frowned. "This shouldn't be a big deal, right? This matter can be said to be small, but it can also be said to be big. It depends on whether the hall master will pursue this matter or not. I was also wondering why the hall master's expression was so ugly these 2 days. Now I finally understand. It's because you ran out with Madman without saying a word." Wang Yun shook her head and laughed. "I'll pay attention next time." Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. "Yes." Wang Yun nodded. At this moment, for inner court disciples walked in together. One of them took out a medicinal herb and handed it to Wang Yin with both hands. He asked with anticipation, "Look at this medicinal herb. How many soul stones can it be exchanged for?" Wang Yin took the medicinal herb and looked at it carefully. This golden flower was the size of a palm. Every petal looked as if it was cast in gold, dazzling and dazzling. What was even more strange was that the stamen in the middle of the petals was arranged in a pattern that looked like a divine dragon. Qin Feiyang unintentionally glanced at the golden flower, but with just a glance he was unable to shift his gaze away. It was actually the flower of the dragon god, one of the ingredients to refine the dragon soul, primordial spirit pill. Wang Yun observed for a while and also recognized that it was the dragon god's flower. A trace of surprise crept into her bright eyes. She looked at the 4 disciples and smiled. "Dragon God's flower, 100,000 soul stones. There are actually 100,000 of them." The 4 of them were wild with joy. Qin Feiyang put down the account book in his hand and walked to Wang Yun's side. Without batting an eyelid, he smiled and said, "Senior sister Wang Yin, can you let me take a look?" Wang Yun handed it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed it and looked at it curiously. After repeated confirmation, he confirmed that this was indeed the dragon god's flower. Immediately, his heart began to burn. This dragon god's flower could not enter the resource hall. This was because once they entered the resource hall, they would be kept in the resource hall's treasury. At that time, it would be very difficult to take it out. The 4 of you, I offer 400,000 soul stones for this dragon god's flower. If you are willing to sell it to me, then come find me at the cave tonight. Qin Feiyang sent a sound transmission. The 4 of them were happy. Suddenly, they heard Qin Feiyang's voice in their minds, and their expressions couldn't help but be stunned. Qin Feiyang thought to himself, for 100,000 soul stones and 100,000 soul stones, which one is more worth it? I don't need to say it, you all should know. Clear, clear. Since Senior Brother Jiang wants it, then we will naturally sell it to Senior Brother Jiang. The man in the lead thought. Qin Feiyang secretly laughed and said, All right, come find me at the cave tonight. All right. The man replied, then coughed dryly and extended his hand. I suddenly don't want to sell it. Please return the dragon god's flower to me. Wang Yun was startled and asked in confusion, Why don't you want to sell it? The man said, If you don't want to sell it, then you don't want to sell it. Why do you have so many reasons? All right. Wang Yun sighed helplessly, reluctantly looked at the dragon god's flower, and then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Junior, Brother Jiang, return it to them. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded and handed the dragon god's flower to the man. After the man put away the dragon god's flower, he secretly said, Senior Brother Jiang, this matter is settled. We will look for you tonight. Qin Feiyang secretly replied. The 4 of them looked at each other, then turned around and left quickly. What a pity. Wang Yun's face was filled with regret. It's indeed a pity, but there's nothing we can do about it. After all, our resource hall doesn't force people to buy or sell. Qin Feiyang laughed. Wang Yun nodded. You guys came really early. At this time, Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi walked side by side into the resource hall with smiles on their faces. It's not that we came early, it's that you guys came too late. Qin Feiyang looked at the 2 of them and said indifferently. Mu Tianyang said, There's a reason why we came late. Yes. Hua Yi nodded. What's the reason? Qin Feiyang and Wang Yin looked at the 2 of them suspiciously. The other staff members who were busy also came over curiously. Mu Tianyang laughed. Early in the morning, we received news that the Sky Dragon City is in chaos. Sky Dragon City is in chaos? Qin Feiyang and the others were surprised. Hua Yi smiled mysteriously. You guys will never guess why the Sky Dragon City is in chaos. Don't keep us in suspense. Hurry up and say it. Wang Yun said angrily. Hua Yi chuckled and said, Madman. Madman? Everyone was stunned. Yes, I heard that he killed hundreds of people in one night. Hua Yi said, What? Kills so many people? What is he going to do? Everyone looked at each other. Mu Tianyang and I went to investigate. The people he killed were basically rotten people who liked to be arrogant, despotic, and bully others. Mu Tianyang said, he really went to punish evil and promote good. Everyone was stunned. The news of Madman saying that he would eliminate evil for the people had already spread in the 9-Heaven Palace. But everyone thought that he was just joking, but they did not expect that he would really do it. Let me tell you guys, the people in Sky Dragon City are in a panic. Those arrogant people in the past, especially those playboys, are like mice, obediently hiding in their homes, not daring to go out, afraid that they would bump into Madman. Hua Yi laughed. Actually, this is good. I understand those playboys in Sky Dragon City too well. Each of them is more arrogant than anyone else. They should have been extinguished long ago. Wang Yin snorted coldly. Mu Tianyang said suspiciously, Senior Sister Wang Yin, listening to your words, could it be that you are also from a family in Sky Dragon City? No, no, no. Wang Yin immediately waved her hand and laughed. How could I have such a family background? It's just that before I entered the Nine Heaven Palace, I worked in some restaurants in Sky Dragon City and saw many playboys. So that's how it is. Mu Tianyang suddenly understood. The places that playboys frequented were undoubtedly the big restaurants. So it was normal for Wang Yin, who had worked in a restaurant before, to understand. What are you all doing? Do you all have nothing to do? Suddenly, a stern voice sounded. Everyone's face changed as they hurriedly returned to their posts. Because the owner of the voice was Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan walked into the resource palace in large strides and looked at everyone gloomily. Everyone lowered their heads, busy with the things in their hands, not daring to look at Feng Yuan. Jiang Haotian. Suddenly, Feng Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang. Palace Master. Qin Feiyang immediately stood up and looked at Feng Yuan. Not bad. How many days have you been in the resource palace? You actually dare to ignore my existence. Feng Yuan said angrily. Disciple doesn't dare. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and said, It seemed that this old thing was going to use this as a pretext to make a fuss. You call this not daring? I asked you to go to the treasure pavilion to bid for the 4 symbols infinite divine pill, but what about you? You actually left your post and fooled around with madman? What do you think my resource palace is? You come and go as you please? Feng Yuan shouted. Palace Master, this matter is due to Disciple's lack of consideration, but Disciple had no choice. It was Madman who insisted on dragging Disciple there. Qin Feiyang said helplessly. He told you to go, so you went. Are you a dog by his side? So obedient. Feng Yuan said. Qin Feiyang's face turned cold and said, Palace Master, this matter is indeed Disciple's fault, but please don't hurt others. What a joke. As the Palace Master of the Resource Palace, don't tell me I don't have the right to teach you a lesson. Feng Yuan laughed angrily. Of course Palace Master has the right. But what am I going to do with Madman? I believe Palace Master also knows in his heart. Even if you don't know, you must be clear that this matter is related to Shangguan Fenglan. Qin Feiyang said. Presumptuous! Who do you think you are? How dare you use Shangguan Fenglan to suppress this old man? Feng Yuan was furious. Disciple didn't mean that. What I said was just the truth. If Palace Master insists on pursuing the matter, you can go to Shangguan Fenglan or the Great Elder. Because this is also the Great Elder's order. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Hearing this, Feng Yuan's old eyes suddenly had a trace of surprise. It was actually related to the Great Elder. Seeing Feng Yuan's reaction, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly. It seemed that Feng Yuan didn't know about the matter between Long Tianyu and the Grey Castle. Wang Yin. Suddenly, Feng Yuan shouted. Lord Palace Master. Wang Yin's delicate body trembled, and she quickly ran to Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan immediately slapped Wang Yin's face fiercely. And Qin Feiyang stared at Feng Yuan. Why did he hate Wang Yin? Wang Yin covered her burning cheeks with a puzzled look on her face. Mu Tianyang and the others were also suspicious. Feng Yuan looked at Wang Yin and said, When Jiang Haotian entered the resource palace, you were in charge of leading him, right? Wang Yin nodded. Slap. Feng Yuan slapped Wang Yin's face again and said, Then did you tell him that before leaving the resource palace he had to ask for leave from me first? Wang Yin shook her head. Slap. Feng Yuan slapped her again and said, Then tell me, do you deserve to be punished? Yes. Wang Yin nodded, not daring to resist at all. She didn't even dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. Seeing Wang Yin being beaten, Qin Feiyang's face became more and more gloomy. Feng Yuan was obviously venting his personal anger. With Shangguan Fenglan and the Great Elder, these 2 mountains, Feng Yuan didn't dare to do anything to him. But if he gave up like this, then he, as the palace master of the resource palace, would lose face, so he went to find Wang Yin. In other words, Wang Yin became his punching bag. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.